Hello, this is the Stories Beside channel. I release videos every day for you. Subscribe and click the bell.
Sometimes Adriana wondered maybe her mom had given birth to her for nothing. It never crossed her mom's mind. On the contrary, she praised. Everyone advised her to get rid of the child. No profession, no job, no roof over her head, but she never lets a cigarette out of her mouth. Almost every day she gets drunk in one company or another. She stays the night where she drank. Yes. Does she even know who is the father of her unborn child? Not a wench, who she herself calls bikers. And people talk about such brave people who ride their motorcycles on the roads. And they say, shuddering meat. At what speed, if something happens, you can't gather guests. And I spit on everyone and gave birth to you. Proudly said my mother, Miranda. And it must be said that she had a baby. Miranda has settled down nicely. No, in other people's eyes, she's still the same unattached person. Compared to her old self, the change was dramatic. Miranda and her daughter had taken up residence in the caravan. In the housing trailer was not a friend of the owner of the campground. There were different housing for those who are richer than mom, wooden houses, simplified versions of the cheapest, where you could settle trailers. The first thing that Adriana remembered in her life, such an old trailer, she was crawling on a disassembled bed. All around, windows left and right in the back, and even overhead. And in front on both sides are lockers. If they have doors open, she shared. 2 rooms on one half, Adriana on the other half, where there is a table and 2 chairs. Miranda is alone or with any of the guests. They drink beer and listen to music. Sometimes the Marcus falls asleep on a padded chair, dropping his head on the table. If it rains, he drums on the metal lodge. There you are sitting in a tin can and you're being hosed down. But the worst is if it's cold outside. Here are the heavy blankets and the survivors warm themselves under them. Adriana sleeps in a jacket and still wakes up at night from the fact that she is cold. Can't feel her arms or legs. She learned early to turn on the boiling pot, warms her tea in a half-liter jar. Some fringe commission would have killed Miranda for good. The child did not do everything that children are strictly forbidden to do. Grips the scepter jar with a towel, pours himself into a cup, gets drunk on his mom and puts her to bed. And if any of mom's friends get the urge to talk, Time sits in front of the TV6, listens obediently and nods. And some overgrown bearded man in Denmark with skulls sympathizes and strokes her head. And the ruling man will take a chocolate bar out of his pocket. Adriana went to school when they moved. A mother of someone's dead daughter, because Adriana never met her grandparents, had an inheritance. Miranda left for a few days, entrusting her daughter to friends who lived in the same neighborhood. Adriana recalled sitting around the fire with them until late at night. She was a remarkably obedient child, and later she wondered why. Not in Miranda, she went to the character that not only do not put your finger in your mouth, she did not know any restraint. Perhaps it was the father, about whom Miranda never once dropped a word to her daughter. He was a quiet and shy young man. That shyness became the only thing she left as a legacy to Adriana. Miranda returned the same as ever. Her stamp had died. She did not grieve. On the contrary, she was unaccustomedly excited and said that they were now going to buy a room for themselves. The deal went through very quickly, and it wasn't 2 weeks before they moved in. It had been a blow to Adriana. She reflected on it all later when she was older. Probably the money her mother had been given was very little and only enough for such a place to live. The oldest stock of the house, which no one will ever repair, is easier to demolish. A room of 15 square meters, gloomy palaces on all sides, surrounded by the same shabby houses. The entrance is shabby. It's like a horror movie. A long, narrow corridor painted blue. Chassis is falling off in places and 8 doors. 6 rooms. Shared kitchen and restroom. A bathroom so horribly filthy that none of the tenants ever tried to do anything about it. Maybe the others went somewhere else to bathe. Adriana remembered her mom washing in a basin in her room. And then those who lived downstairs would come to complain that they had a wet spot on the ceiling. It was cramped and cold, but there was nature all around. Mom's friends were there. And here it's gloomy, The sun never peaks on the north side, and there's not a blade of grass in the yard. At home, there are mean aunts all around. One of them was counting on buying the room Miranda took from her for a pittance. And that same aunt hated her new daughter. Miranda, you could always bullshit. You went into the kitchen without fear. The other women sensed it, and this one can do anything. She'll take a mitt, and a light to the forehead, only a buzz will go off. Letter in her presence only pressed her lip, showing that she is a stranger to them, and will never become her own. And Adriana was afraid to go out into the corridor, and not even to warm up poison for herself. She ate cold what her mother left her, like a mouse, sneaking to the toilet and back again and sitting on the wide windowsill. Sits and peeks out. Is Miranda coming? What else is there to do? Adriana couldn't read at that time. She didn't have any. Miranda had no books and no TV. Now it seemed to Adriana that it was always raining outside the window. But of course it couldn't be like that. It was just the mood, though, as if it was always raining and slushy. When it was time to go to school, her mother took Adriana to the nearest school, the one in the next yard. At that time, Miranda was already working in a wine and tincture store. It wasn't really a store, but a kind of bar. Of course, there were also those who came in for takeaway wine. Miranda poured it from small kegs into plastic bottles, but they were always sticking out. Here, at high tables, men bought wine, and more often tinctures. They talked among themselves for hours, and there was such a smell in the air that you didn't need to ask anyone. It was clear that everyone was drunk. On a platter were lollipops, small ones in brightly colored wrappers. They were free for anyone who bought a drink as an appetizer. But that kind of snack never tempted the men. And Miranda brought Adriana these candies every night. But with the school uniforms, it was a bummer. Friends occasionally gave her something that their own children had grown out of. Miranda didn't know anything about it at all. To her, these things were from another planet. She herself wore jeans so ripped that sometimes she would fall through a hole in a pant leg and t-shirts with provocative inscriptions. It was good that at work it was necessary to wear a deaf robe on top, because from what was written on Miranda across her chest, sometimes even men began to blush and blink. But before taking her daughter to school, Miranda took out of the bag some dark dress, twirled it over the top, and decided that it was quite suitable for school. And the shoes over there are still quite intact, not falling apart. The only thing Miranda bought for her daughter was a very beautiful bow, like a huge butterfly, with white ribbons like curls coming down from it. Adriana spent the whole evening looking at it. She was afraid to breathe on it. Miranda didn't even think of a bouquet for her teacher. September 1st was a disaster for Adriana. She was too different from the other guys that came dressed up in all the new crisp, ogled schoolyard, drowned in flowers, sounded cheerful music, and Adriana stood red with embarrassment. And in her eyes searched despair. One of the girls who happened to be with her, next to her, clutched her nose. It stinks, though. Adriana didn't smell it herself, but maybe she picked up the scent of the old house. Or maybe it was the smell of the bundle of things that one of her mom's friends had brought, and where Miranda had pulled the dress from. Adriana couldn't remember if her mom had washed it or not. But it was worth it to say such one girl, as all the future classmates began to defiantly shuffle away from Adriana. It was a game to them. The same continued after the classroom lineup. I won't sit with her. And me, Nina, she stinks. Jesus. The young teacher's head was already spinning. Okay, what's your name? Let Adriana stay here alone for a while. Teacher, I had a lot of things to do. She had to tell the kids what to bring to class tomorrow. Answer questions from the parents, the table at the door. And yet, when everyone was leaving, she stopped Adriana, who wanted to slip away unnoticed. Wait, tell Mom to buy you back today. I'll wash your clothes. And tell her to be more careful tomorrow and start looking after yourself. You don't want everyone laughing at you. On top of Adriana's misfortune, her bow and her main treasure were stolen. Coming home, the girls sobbed until the evening. Talking to Miranda did not lead to anything. The mother threatened to come to school and kick out all those who hurt her daughter. They wouldn't say a second time, she assured her. That's the 10th way around. And she couldn't imagine what her life would be like if everyone started going around her even the second road, or the third, not the 10th. "Teach me how to do laundry," she asked her mother quietly. "Well, and ironing too." Soon the girl was fully able to take care of herself. Now she stood for a long time in front of a small mirror, looking at herself from all sides. Whether all the button caught did not prevent the skirt from looking neat. It had become her mania. But whether the first impression was the strongest, or whether the smell of the old house was ineradicable, Adriana was never able to make any friends at school. She was shunned by everyone. She did not study better or worse than others. She did her lessons as diligently as she watched her clothes and brought fours faithfully. Once in a while we interspersed and triples, if the control was given, too difficult. And the teacher with a clear conscience stopped paying attention to her. The girl is quiet, inconspicuous girl does not get twos. Nana, of course, saw that in the eyes of the whole class Adriana became an outcast. She tried several times to talk to the children about how important it is to live in friendship, and that in a good team no one should be left out. But our conversations had no effect on the kids, and the teacher stepped in. It was easier that way. She reassured herself about the fact that there is no hand-wringing in her class, and no one beats Adriana, and that she was not loved. It's impossible to make people love her. In addition, the girl behaves quite reasonably, does not pester classmates, does not seek their favor. She seems to have accepted her loneliness, probably finish her studies, and then will go to some technical school or college. Maybe they'll treat her differently. Has Adriana completely faded away? No one had ever heard her laugh, knew nothing about her life outside of school. Not once had she raced with the other girls. It went unnoticed by everyone. It happened when Adriana entered 6th grade. Later, she asked herself why she did it. The principal had instituted new rules at the school, and the cafeteria was no longer open. Now you could only buy a full lunch. First, second, third. There were families where parents thought it was expensive and stopped giving their children money for food. In the morning breakfast, and well, they said to their children, "And come after school, you will have a home-cooked lunch." They got a nerve. At school, they only make money. What happened in practice? By noon, those children who stopped going to the canteen were already hungry for a snack and asked their classmates to bring a couple of pieces of bread to the canteen. Yes, the cook swears it's unnoticeable. Adriana hadn't eaten with everyone since 1st grade. She didn't want to be attacked in the cafeteria. She convinced Miranda that the food at school was bad. So her mother started putting something for her to eat. A sandwich, an apple. And that day, Adriana just felt sorry for her classmate Sophia, a girl from a dysfunctional family with many children. Sophia, as usual, asked the boys for bread, and they all refused. When the class was empty, Adriana took sandwiches out of her bag. "I'll have 2. Sophia took the treat, brought it to her mouth, then grimaced defiantly and ran to throw the sandwich in the trash. "What stinks? Did you find it in a dumpster?" The sandwich only smelled like Krakow sausage, but Adriana imagined what would happen next. Sophia would come back from the cafeteria and tell everyone that the stinker wanted to poison her. Slipped a sandwich she found at the dump, and the whole class will be happy to pick up the Nunenka. All the fun in the middle of a long day filled with boring lessons. And for Adriana, this was probably the last straw. She thought Sophia was a kind of outcast too, always poorly dressed. And her scandalous mother comes almost every week to argue with the teacher and the boys. And it all seems that her daughter is being abused. That's why Sophia is disliked in the class and tries not to get in touch with her. And now she's decided to get popular at Adriana's expense for leading the bullying that's already started. My head hurts. Threw Adriana the teacher, bumping into her in the doorway, and didn't give her a chance to stop herself, afraid she'd burst into tears in front of everyone. She hadn't done that in a long time. But then she finally collapsed. Adriana ran out of the school, tightening her coat as she went, thinking only that it was Friday and she wouldn't see her nasty classmates until Monday. Miranda arrived late as usual. Her store closed at 11, and she was home by midnight. Sometimes jokingly stating that every day was like a holiday, considering that more and more often she ended the day cheerful. It was believable. She started with a light artillery of apple and cherry cider, and sometimes even drank champagne, and ended with cognac. A true wine connoisseur would have been head over heels for that stuff. But Miranda, at the present moment of her life, was fine, and there were no traces of excesses on her face yet. She still resembled a Frenchwoman. Loose hair, light eyes under the wings of her eyebrows, thick silk, a laughing mouth. Quite a few customers came not only to have a drink, but also to chat with Miranda and treat her, of course. Usually by the time her mother arrived, Adriana was asleep on the stove. Miranda was waiting. No surprise dinner, boiled potatoes, fried cutlets, spoon or macaroni and cheese. But on the table, without fail, there was a lamp burning. It was the only thing Miranda had taken from the maternity ward. Or maybe it belonged to her grandmother too. It was a snow-covered marble house with small windows on 3 sides of the world. Adriana was used to falling asleep looking at it, and it seemed that she was not alone in the room. And whoever was now sitting there in the hut was also brooding and dreaming and waiting for her to come through the door. But I can't. I am too big, he is too small, and we will always wait for each other. Adriana thought. Miranda's heart snapped when she saw that the room was dark and the earpiece was off. She slammed her palm on the light switch. There was no doubt there was trouble. God forbid. Adriana knew she was missing at home. She was greatly relieved to see her daughter sitting in the old armchair by the window, albeit crying, but alive here. The fatigue returned. What's wrong? She asked but already only sobs dragged. You can hear it thinly. Come on, Miranda ruffled her hair. She didn't have the energy now to pry into her daughter's soul, to find out why she was in a bad mood. I just wanted to lie down and sleep, and the floor beneath her feet shook slightly. Adriana knew that her mother would not have a heart-to-heart talk with her. She never had, and she never would now. Can I get someone, she asked. In her mind, she said it all, that she couldn't be alone anymore, that she didn't have a single friend, and no longer had the strength to bear the ridicule of the whole world against her. From the looks of it, Miranda wondered, You mean like a puppy or a kitten? Adriana nodded, continuing to stare out the dark window where the rain was running down. Animals were so out of Miranda's range of interest that it took her a moment to concentrate, as if she'd been given a difficult math problem to solve. Well, I don't know, she mused doubtfully. The neighbors probably chewed us out completely then. No, but the girl looked at her mother with those suffering such eyes. That Miranda first noticed from Adriana, only those huge eyes remained. Then the kitten with him at least do not need to walk. You will be less likely to be seen by those harmful grandmothers. So cats don't bark or chew on shoes. She said yes. Adriana hugged her, snuggled up to her, breathed out her native scent. She has no one but her mom. And Miranda's heart ached. How thin is her daughter? She'll never ask me. Yes, she does. She forgets about it. Maybe I'll get her some. They used to give children kevors when they were bleeding. The other day was Saturday, so there was a chance on weekends at the town market. They were selling all sorts of animals: abalone, aquarium, noya, fish, birds, cats, dogs. Adriana didn't have much money. She was saving a little bit from the bills that gave her to go to the nearest grocery store. But the girl knew that it wasn't uncommon for native animals to be given away for free to good hands. Miranda was still asleep when Adriana slipped out of the apartment after a quick cup of coffee. To keep her mother from worrying, she left a note, went to the market, and put it by the electric kettle. Miranda did the same. The first thing she did in the morning was drink coffee, so all sorts of things will be seen. Of course, the most tempting thing is the unattainable. For the 5th time, Adriana walked past a lady who had a white poodle sitting behind her back. I didn't know he was for sale. He was sure the owner, his family. They are one stuck in this strange place and will go home. The owner peeked out from under his jacket, his sharp nose looking around with curiosity. The landlady was asking for a lot of money. Maybe the puppy would go home this time. There'd be no one willing to take him for that price. Cats, as it turned out, weren't doing so well. They were offering pedigree cats. It was clear that Adriana didn't have enough money for either the Semstvo or that Persian. But a man who was passing by winked at Adriana. Do you want one? Little one. I'll send you these in the nearest yard to catch at least in a sack. Adriana shook her head and backed away fearfully. Even though Miranda had friends, she had firmly instilled in her daughter that you shouldn't go anywhere with strange children offering you a puppy or a kitten. And then she saw her old lady sitting a little farther away from everyone. She was dressed in such a way that she was attracted by some old vest, vicious silver fur, green hat with a green pie. Adriana had never seen anyone wear a hat with a feather in her life. Except in fairy tales, the old lady also had round glasses. She looked like an old intellectual who was a little crazy or a little drunk. That was something Adriana was good at. In front of the old lady was a cage of rats, 4 of them. The white rats lived their own lives, paying little attention to people or to what was going on around them. "Come here," the old woman said. Adriana didn't even immediately realize it was for her. But even a crazy grandmother is not a stranger. Adriana timidly approached. "Give me your hand," the old woman said. She took Adriana's hand and opened the window in the cage. "Hold out your hand to the rats. Don't be afraid, they won't bite. Girls." I wanted to say that she didn't need a rat, and in general she was afraid. Adriana was too timid and more often than not preferred not to object. When her palm found itself in the cage, the rats were interested, reaching to cash in. Adriana could barely keep from shrieking and yanking her hand away from their tiny wet noses and the sharp yellow of their teeth. But then one of the rats jumped right into her palm. "Take it," said the old lady. "Give me some money." "What have you got? What's a nickel?" "All right, come on." The old lady began to rummage through her clothes. Whether the pocket where she wanted to hide the coin was somewhere deep, at least under 20 sweater. "But I don't want a rat. I don't like rats." "Adriana don't like, but you need that rat," said the old woman. She emphasized the last words in her voice, and Adriana, again, did not dare to argue. "Is it a girl or a boy?" Adriana asked hopelessly. "It is. It's probably both." The old woman thought for a moment. She was crazy. She had no choice. "What's the name?" Adriana didn't add his or hers. "Riches. And now I'm left with 1 boy and 2 girls. That's right. His name is Talent and theirs is Power and Love. And at home I have more luck and health and happiness." The old woman was already muttering something to herself, sinking back into thoughtfulness. Had with her a purse sewn from multicolored. We had planned to carry the kitten home in it. Now the rat was on his way. All the way he was unusually quiet. Only in the shuttle bus, when Adriana held the purse on her lap, she felt that in it there was something soft and heavy, sticky and moving. Adriana sighed and imagined what the guys would say if they found out that Adriana was friends with a rat none other than the rat herself would nickname her. The other thing was that she wouldn't tell anyone about her pet. And how else would her mom feel about him? "Oh, God, gross, throw it away," Miranda shouted. Adriana clutched the bag to his chest. If anything, dealing with the rat was a simple matter of tossing it into the nearest dumpster. And that was it. Either it would take root there, or the first window it hit would break it. But Adriana couldn't throw away a living thing. "Did you pay money for it too?" Mom looked at Adriana compassionately like a miserable nickel. The girl whispered. Miranda sighed as deeply as if she was trying to hold back sobs. "Okay," she said, standing up. "That thing is going to need a cage, isn't it?" Probably, Adriana agreed with a guilty look. A cage was an extra expense. She was well aware of that. "I think I saw an old bird cage in the basement. Sit down. I'll get it myself. I know you're afraid to go in there." The basement was all through the house, damp and dark. Every tenant had a storeroom or carcass down there. The basement smelled of guts and pickles. Adriana was afraid to go there even with her mom and a flashlight. Miranda had actually seen a dusty old cage there. Maybe it belonged to someone, or maybe the owner had long since died or moved away. Miranda was ready to scramble. If someone decided to take that cage away from her, or at the very least pay her. After all, the rat was the only thing her daughter had asked of her. "Here," said Miranda, bringing the cage into the room. With a wet rag, she dusted it. "I really hope this thing escapes from it and jumps into your bed in the morning," said Adriana, and went to wash the rat's apartment. "What is Rat's name?" Adriana decided not to tell her mother. Miranda was able to laugh absolutely mercilessly at times. At such moments, the girl made a vow to herself that she would not tell her mother again. Nothing, ever. She swore many times. The first time she broke her vow. The rat escaped the next day in the evening. Adriana sat late at night near the cage, held out the breadcrumbs to the whelp, and he took them with flexible legs, with long pink fingers, and chewed so appetizingly that Adriana almost forgave her new friend the fact that he was a rat. I guess so. She could carry him in her arms, in time when she got used to it. And first thing in the morning, Adriana rushed to the cages and saw that it was empty. Only in one place were the bars a little loose. Adriana gasped in grief. He had escaped. She had never raised her voice. And here straight shouted, "Who ran away with me?" And Miranda rose up on the bed. That thing, thank God. And collapsed back on her pillow to sleep. Is that what you wished for her? Adriana burst into tears for the second time in 2 days. You wished her away. You brought that broken cage. Miranda silently placed one of the pillows on her head so that her daughter's cries would not disturb her sleep. Adriana rushed to search the apartment. She foresaw that if she didn't find a rat in the room, she would have to go to the hallway, to the kitchen, to the neighbors. And after asking if our rat had run in, she and her mom would be fine if they didn't get evicted. Adriana even looked into the hut. Suddenly the rat liked the hut and decided to live there. But inside the marble hut was empty. Only a small light bulb was cold. Not in the closet, not under the couch, not in the dresser anywhere. There was no wealth anywhere. Adriana lay down on the floor and looked under the old nightstand left by the previous owners. And there in the wall was a hole, a black hole with smooth edges, just like Georgians with someone's sharp bags. Mom, give me the flashlight phone. Are you gonna let me sleep or not? Miranda's totally pissed off. God, 1 day a week. Get off, get off, get off. She tried to get comfortable in bed so that she could go back to sleep, but there was no way she could do it. Adriana and her phone were already in Crazen's eyes, and damn it, there seemed to be glimpses of someone's eyes, or maybe teeth, deep down there. Adriana, you found your rat without grabbing it with your bare hands. Miranda's resigned to the futility of her attempts to sleep. She pulls you to wring your hand with my scarf. You'd think in that little hole. She'll be able to slip her hand around a muddy, thick, dirty scarf. It would be good to at least walk like that again. Forgetting her fear, Adriana dived her hand into the resulting hole. It was unexpectedly deep and there. Yes, there was a soft, warm body, rats, and something else. Some object with hard edges. But in the same instant, Adriana realized that it was impossible to try to get it out now because her mother would intervene. And then whatever was found, there would be Mommy's first and foremost. But after all, it wasn't him who was being bullied at school, it wasn't her who was sobbing. So he didn't have the strength to breathe. The breath came out like a moan. It wasn't her who drove to the market at dawn and talked to the crazy old lady. Adriana had only pulled a rat out of the burrow. There it is. Or did it hide and sit there quietly? Found it. Well, calm down. I'll fix the cage and then maybe we'll get him a glass aquarium. Miranda reluctantly walked barefoot across the floor. A new day was beginning. War herself didn't quite understand why she had put off her exploration of Brandy until the next day. She wished she was home alone. Maybe then a miracle would happen. And if not, and in a beautiful hole will be some nonsense, for example. For example, the same old truth, ajar, and even empty. Then there will be no one to laugh at it with hopes like a little child. And all Sunday afternoon, Adriana looked anxiously at her mother. Would she not start cleaning? Would she scrub the floors, pushing the furniture aside? But Miranda cleaned purely on inspiration, and it had not visited her today. She was once again on the subject of the dirty bathroom after going in there, wanting to chlorine Miranda. It had been a day when she didn't like everything around her, and the shabby kitchen was always crowded with these gossipy women. And outside the window is such a dreary, hopeless landscape that you want to become Raskolnikov, as in Dostoevsky's novel, and grab an axe. Eventually, Miranda wrapped the curtains and settled down again. This time, though, to watch a movie. Tropics, endless beaches, young, beautiful characters, love like no other. This was what was dear to Miranda's heart, and what carried her from the gloomy slush of fall to the world she wanted to be in. Now everything around her seemed amazing. She was doing the usual things, cooking soup on the stove, washing dishes, doing her homework, and everything was going well for her. If she had been home alone, she would have been humming as well. Miranda had told her daughter 100 times that she had no voice and no ear. But sometimes singing isn't about musicality at all. It's about a state of mind. Rat was behaving quite normally, no longer trying to escape. He often rose on his hind legs, held on to the bars of the cage with his front ones, and watched what Adriana was doing. And the girl felt as if she had a conspirator in the family. The next day it was time to go to school. Usually Adriana saw Monday as an Egyptian execution. There was still a whole week ahead of her, full of endless lessons. And most importantly, bullying, classmates, and general rejection. But now the girl lived with one thing: when she would return and be home alone. What will happen then? She thought only about it. And it seemed so detached, immersed in his thoughts. It was as if it did not exist. And her classmates began to tease the dummy for the first time. It wasn't interesting at all. The teacher was trying to find out why Adriana had run away on Friday without waiting for the end of class. Sophia stayed nearby and behaved very defiantly. She thought Adriana would complain about her and prepared to fight back, using all kinds of arguments. It's not my fault that Vanechka eats garbage. Just don't offer them to me. But Adriana only shrugged her shoulders at the teacher's questions. I don't remember why I left. I think I had a headache. You should have gone to the school nurse. Well, I'll do that next time. But as soon as the last bell rang, Adriana was gone. She told herself she was just worried about the rat. How he'd be all day without her. She was afraid to admit to herself that she had put everything on the line. She expects to find something extraordinary in the rat's hole and just can't bear to be disappointed. The rat greeted her with some strange sound reminiscent of Vanya's quiet Paris. It was as if he was tired of waiting and was rushing her. But now Adriana was in a hurry too, even though she knew for sure that Miranda would not come before 12 o'clock in the morning. Adriana only threw off her jacket, and then with an effort pushed the massive old nightstand away from the wall, looked at the rat hanging opposite the cage, and ran her hand down the hole. Deep to her elbow moments later, she had already extracted the box into the light. She sat down directly on the floor and began to examine it, noticing that her hands were trembling. The casket was of injured metal. A pattern appeared between the edges. The lock was obviously nothing a new fingernail could pick up and flip off. But Adriana slowly, although inside there was clearly something lying, she turned the box over and saw the date 1865 engraved on the bottom. Clearly the box had been made then. But the house where she and her mother lived now wasn't that old. Adriana wondered for the first time who had lived in this room before her, and why he had thought to brick up the box in the wall and take it away afterward. Maybe something tragic had gotten in the way, and he hadn't had the time. Adriana took a deep breath, effortlessly managed the lock, and left the lid. That's where her breath broke. The tale continued. Indeed, someone had decided to entrust eternity with jewelry, rings, and a brooch of artistic work with large stones. The bracelet seemed to be made of sparkling lace. So delicate was the metallic ligature of the pattern, and so many of the shouting stones carried away a strand of pearls. But it was the simple oval pendant that caught Adriana's attention. It was shaped like the same box in miniature and just as easy to open. And inside was, yes, it was a portrait, an antique miniature, a child. Adriana couldn't even tell if it was a boy, a girl, black curls, a white shirt, and the look of big eyes, at once helpless, trusting, and commanding. Adriana realized everything she would give her mom, just not this. She fumbled around the room and didn't immediately realize where to hide the thing. She had her own stash, randomly appearing. Her mom had bought her a cheap writing utensil made of blue plastic. The top was glued on top, also plastic, only a white profile. Adriana put her pens in a special hole, and then she found out that if she pulled it, a small, almost flat drawer would slide out, and then she could hide various small things. And Miranda would be looking for it for the rest of her life. Adriana hid the pendant and then snatched the rat out of the cage and kissed its tiny wet nose, forgetting about the long yellow teeth and the noticeable odor. "Thank you." When Miranda got home, Adriana was awake. She was sitting by the table, and on it stood an open jewelry box. If eyes can burn with excitement, Adriana's eyes were burning. "Why didn't you lie down?" "Easy?" Miranda was surprised and walked over to the table. "What have you got there?" Oh, for a few moments. It looked like weak eyes, glassy or mouth open. Adriana hurriedly explained everything, but in a context acceptable to her mom. Not about the old lady, not about the rats. She didn't even mention it. She said she was cleaning the floor and something got caught. There was a hole in the wall, and it was in there. And there it was. Miranda let out a scream. She screamed. It could only be like that in her youth when she was riding her bike like a gorilla. This immediately caused a reaction in the communal apartment. The walls resounded on both sides, and a couple of moments later, also behind the drums or at the door. What happened? What was murdered? Call the police. Evict the hell out of them. Miranda responded with a long, florid phrase that had only 2 censored words, old purses, and the rest a recommended route. Where was this purse suggested to go? After that, she called one of her many friends on the phone. "Drop everything and get over here. You don't want to throw a pillow. And I'm your subject here, such Satsiki. Do not ask where this 1001 night." From excitement, Miranda began to swear again, so that Adriana did not understand her at all. The residents of the communal apartment did not manage to sleep that night. One shock after another awaited them. First came a bitterly ambitious man about 40 years old, which the old ladies could see only in a terrible dream. 2 meter tall, broad-shouldered, and all kinds of metal gimmicks, jackets, bearded with a chicken low voice, old ladies, immediately trembling counter, knocked down the kitchen and called the police. While the guards of order rode, bitterly had time to appreciate the treasures found. Harmless Jaundice is waiting for the wench. Miranda, don't worry, we'll soon talk it over. He disappeared before the police arrived and took the box with him behind his back. Miranda had been monstrously thoughtless in entrusting what she thought was a real treasure to an old acquaintance. Adriana might have asked her mother to be more careful, but now she saw the treasure as something almost irrelevant to her. Her mother wouldn't have found the metal anyway. When the police arrived, 2 young boys. They had to content themselves with choking old women's speeches about that one time. A companion and 5 fingers pointed ominously at the smirking. And Miranda in the middle of the night taking to her various criminal-type personalities, not embarrassed by the child. Miranda was apparently euphoric. "Would you boys like a drink?" She offered her named guests a drink. They did draw up the paper and sometimes labor to her. It was the first time in her memory that men in uniform had come. She was afraid her mother would be taken away. But Miranda nonchalantly spun away and with a sweet smile. She saw the policemen off like best friends. "What will happen now?" Adriana asked in a trembling voice. "We'll probably pay the fine." Miranda yawned and finally got undressed for the night. "All that stuff. Go to sleep, kitten." Now a new life begins. Much later, Adriana realized that her mother had decided not to make the fine public, but to sell it really through her semi-criminal friends, and really not deceived in the sense that she got even more than she accounted on. Agaric had probably gotten his hands pretty good, but Miranda was satisfied. Adriana never found out exactly how much money her mother had received, but Miranda immediately went with her daughter to the realtors to buy a new apartment, and she acted like a visiting star. In fact, that was all they had enough for. An apartment in a new house, which the mother and daughter both considered. The posh house stood in an upscale neighborhood. There was a rooftop garden and a concierge sitting in the entryway. And Miranda had also bought herself a car, not a new one, as she said, a posh one too. There were a few other little things though, clothes for both of them. And to add to the exuberance, Miranda had a new job. The same David must have been very good at arranging things. And in gratitude tried, arranged Miranda, as not young, very strange character knew one writer. Miranda became his house ruler or something, and in time, his real right-hand woman. It was hard to imagine that she would be suitable for this role, not so well educated, far from being an ideal hostess. She was, however, a good fit. The writer found Miranda amusing, and she did not annoy him at all. The two were a perfect match. Miranda ordered the game that the writer liked. If there was a cleanup job to be done, she'd call the guys from the clinics and the company to keep herself clean. But the writer somehow decided that he needed such a woman in the house, who did not take anything to heart and felt his mood, could be silent all day long, or told various tales that switched with her. In everyday life, the writer was not demanding, only that strong coffee was always at hand. And in the evenings, when Miranda went home, she always left a filled thermos for him. "You'll make your heart race," she warned him. They were almost immediately on a first-name basis, as if they weren't master and servant, buddies. The writer only waved it off. "You should live as if you were riding a motorcycle. Like you told me the other day, if he crashes at such a speed, you won't have to suffer for long. You'll go straight to heaven." Miranda was squinting. Or hell. What could be even more fun? As one good poet Kersakov wrote, preparing for, "Have a James Harley Davidson and a Derek at the entrance with you. But still, trust me. In every atom, there is a mystery, standing more often than serpents, and one who will one day point himself at the door. Prepare to smoke forever in the fire of the furnace. Prepare yourself. Recall Lily, your sorrow. In every hell there's sweat, sake, bushel, keys, night conversations with sugar, black tea." Miranda nodded and quietly feigned the door behind her. The writer's future did not concern her. What about Adriana? Her mother had immediately taken her out of her old school, not because she wanted to spare the girl from the classmates who had poisoned her for so many years. It's just that there was an equally elite school next to an elite house, and Adriana was enrolled there. It's the closest commute. The school's in the courtyard. You could look out the window to see if the lights were on in your classroom in the morning or not. And it was impossible to imagine that any of the students would be harassed. A class of 15 kids, all roughly well-mannered, and a teacher who looks like Mary Poppins, above everyone. But before that, Adriana could have an hour of triumph if she wanted it. Together with her mother, they went to the school to pick up their papers. It had come to light that their little family had gotten rich. True, no one knew exactly how, but they were walking down the school corridors, Miranda and Adriana in a cool mat, as Sophia told me later, choking on the excess of emotion. "Do you know how much such a jacket costs? Boots, it's awesome in general. Come to think of it, Adriana's not up to it now." Adriana heard that whisper that accompanied her and her mother, but walked on without raising her eyes. She knew she would never willingly stay at this school, even if she started being carried in her arms. And triumphing over those who had wronged her was not something she wanted. Hurry up and get her papers and forget about this place. That's all. In the new school, she was so calm, as if she was surrounded by children from another planet, where there were no such feelings as anger, envy, bullying. If she asked questions, she was greeted with friendly answers from several girls who showed with all their behavior that they were not averse to be friends with her. And the teacher sincerely tried to make Adriana understand the new topic and cope with the control work. The past gradually began to be forgotten. Adriana was surprised to feel a heart itch. Everything was weakening. Some joys of life came to the forefront. She noted that she now behaves like an ordinary girl asking her mother to go with her to the store for this or that cover. From time to time, she stays overnight with one of her new friends and tapes up her room with posters of one of the trendy rock bands. When she moved on to high school, the writer died. And since he had no loved ones, he left a will that passed everything to Miranda, including royalties from his books. Adriana and her mother moved again, now to the deceased's country house. Miranda decided to rent the apartment for the time being. "When you graduate from school and become of age, it will belong to yourself," Miranda promised her daughter. Adriana didn't want to change schools, and now Miranda took her to the start of classes every morning in her new car. Shortly after the writer died and Miranda's inheritance, the rat died as well. It was already a long-lived animal. Miranda didn't recognize the mystery of the animal and didn't understand why her daughter was trying her best to save him. as Adriana tearfully returned from the vet. The rat had grown a large tumor, and surgery only briefly prolonged his days. Shortly after, the rat did not Miranda in a fit of cleaning, and for putting things in order gained just that with gusts. Threw away the old writing utensil along with the antique column. Adriana had not intended to reveal her secret to her mother, but now in desperation she told her what she had lost. Unfortunately, she didn't notice the loss until the next day, and the company that was responsible for cleaning the bins had already cleared their trash, removed early in the morning. A giddy Miranda waved her hand. "We're not going to go through the entire city dump. It's a shame, of course, but that's the way it is." Nothing can be too precious, and Adriana accepted it, though she never told her mother that it wasn't really the jewelry that she was sorry for, but the portrait, no matter how much it cost. In the meantime, the person depicted in the miniature had become her own. When her friends started talking about, "Oh, Adriana's boy," she thought, though it was silly and childish with the one who looked at her from the portrait with big black eyes. They were hopelessly separated in time. That was all. Since then, there were no money-related surprises in their family, but they lived more than prosperously. The writer's books kept coming out, and the bank account kept growing. If Miranda had been accustomed to luxury, she would have successfully spent everything. But she still made do with a rather modest amount, and decided to save the rest for her daughter. At the graduation party, Adriana got drunk for the first time in her life. Former classmates seemed to have thrown off their decency and masks. Young men and women partied in a way they couldn't afford before. Fortunately, it did not have bad consequences for Adriana. She merely fell asleep at dawn and woke up in the evening, popping a headache pill with a cup of coffee. She studied when she was no longer interfered with perfectly and got into the institute without any problems. Miranda didn't approve of her choice. She herself would never go to biology, but she didn't want to get in the way. "Better something creative," she sighed. "Variety Show Business Literary Institute." Adriana looked at her like a little mom. "But I don't have the aptitude." "Well, yes, but some people manage to make it without any ability. It's just a different life out there. It just picks you up and carries you along. Vivid experiences, interesting people. What's in store for you? You'll spend your life going to the same job in the morning and coming home in the evening. You won't even realize you're trying. I don't know. When you're surrounded by routine, life goes by really fast. 10 years is like a blink of an eye. But why one job? Well, not just one is better. I'd like to find my own business and never give it up." In her 4th year of university, she got married. Adriana didn't want to go anywhere. Going away for the summer would be enough for her practice. She would have preferred to spend the last summer months at home. To sleep well, to lie in the garden with a book and a can of Coca-Cola, to listen to music, and click at least on the phone at all the acquaintances she hadn't had time to see. But Miranda bought her a trip to Turkey and pushed her to vacation almost by force. "It's like you're not even my daughter. But how can you be such a bore, and about the book, and girlfriend nothing but all she kept saying." Apparently, some higher power heard Miranda. And already on the airplane, Adriana met Frank. He was a businessman, lived in the same city as her, and was also flying on vacation. At first, they stayed close to each other, as they had no other acquaintances here, and then imperceptibly became friends, and then began to spend time together. They decided to get married before Christmas. Frank said that it was the most romantic time, and indeed, everything was beautiful. And Adriana's outfit, in addition to white lace, a new dress was served with a cape for warmth because it was to be photographed in the open air. The cape was reversed with white fur. A country restaurant in an old manor house and a wedding trip to Prague were good. When did they celebrate Christmas in the square? There was mulled wine in their glass. Miranda was alone, but she wasn't sad at all. About the war, even her mother seemed relieved. She now considered her parental duty finally fulfilled and returned to the life she had lived before. Old friends began to visit her, and when Adriana visited her mother, she often forced a raucous party at her place. Adriana received her diploma, but further on there was a hitch for a while. Then for a young woman to go to work in a school was out of the question. "I'm going to lose you." Teaching is a 24-hour-a-day profession. and I want you to belong at least a little to me and our children." Her husband told her seriously. Adriana thought was about a nature reserve, but it would be a long drive to get there. The employees would move, a small village, build houses there or get dorm rooms. Of course, that didn't suit Frank. He couldn't give up his business. The university came together and there was no place in one of the departments. And then we'll see, as Frank said. In his heart, what he wanted most was for his wife to go on maternity leave. He himself was his parents' only son. Growing up, missing his peers and dreaming of having many children in his own family. But Adriana's pregnancy was not coming. Not immediately, but she listened to her husband's entreaties, and they both went to the doctor. Some problems were detected, like on treatment, but nothing helped. The second Adriana thought sadly of the old lady with the rats. That one, of course, was no longer in the world, or else it would be time to go to her and ask for an animal named Mother of Many Children. Then Adriana would probably give birth to 7 at once. A bitter joke. Nothing else occurred to the young woman. Frank talked about going abroad, about the doctors there. And then, as if waving his hand, he listened to the advice of an old acquaintance. "Take a child from an orphanage," she said. "It has happened many times. People will already report. They will take someone else's baby and God will give them their own. The main thing then is not to refuse to accept it." Frank tried to speak in a light tone, but it was obvious that the idea was in his heart from the point of view of all the supervisory authorities. They were ideal candidates, a young, well-to-do couple who lacked only a baby to make them happy. However, they disagreed about the baby. Frank insisted on taking a very young girl, no older than a year, so that the child had no memories of the past, and the baby considered them their real parents. But that's not fair. Adriana objected. "We'll still have to tell the foster child the truth. But why the psychological trauma?" Frank objected. "Because different things happen in life, and a son or daughter, when they grow up, has the right to pull themselves back to their roots. Some drunkard from the back alley, or to a mother who has already cursed her mistakes 100 times, some Prezik, which day after day, year after year, fate puts on the table, that very handkerchief." Frank only waved his hand, not wanting to argue further. In the orphanage, they were really advised to look first not at babies, but at least at children from the younger group, assuring that it is not a cat in a bag. Here will be scene and character and inclinations. At the same time, the children are still small enough to form an inner core, and they will get used to the new environment quickly. Behind was the collection of documents and all sorts of examinations and schools of foster parents. They stood in the playroom very bright, cozy, and around the books crowded about 20 kids in shirts and dresses with puffy tights. Some of them had their finger in their mouth. Someone got tired of looking at unfamiliar uncles and aunts and returned to the game. Frank, looking around confused, and the teacher tried to turn his gaze from one child to another. And to each one she said something nice. "Here's Nadenka. She serves herself and can make a crib. And she always helps me to put toys away in the drawer. She likes books again. He spends hours looking at the pictures. He'll probably be the first to read. A real artist. In all our concerts, she recites poems and reads. She's a very artistic girl." From time to time, Frank looked at his wife, as if asking her advice. But Adriana was silent. And then another boy came out of the bedroom, and she forgot all about it. It was a copy of the child whose portrait in the locket she had kept so long. He looked at her and Adriana almost shrieked. The same black eyes of the kindergarten teacher noticed the boy too. "This is Alex. He doesn't speak yet, but it's all ahead of him. We're just a little behind the others." "Alex," she said with a sigh. Forgetting about her husband, Adriana approached the boy, squatted down in front of him and asked, "Let's go home." He looked her straight in the eyes and seemed to understand more than he could put into words, even if he spoke. The director of the orphanage was trying to talk them out of it, to make them choose another child. "Why would you, Alex? You can't say you fell in love with him at first sight, can you? It doesn't work that way. He's got a lot of health problems. We don't know if he'll regain his speech, how much. And there are doubts about the boy's mental capacity." Frank's hands are spread out, saying he understands, but there's nothing he can do. His wife's will, And Adriana asked as if she hadn't heard the director. He's an absolute orphan, raised by his young mother. Who's the father? She wasn't exactly sure herself, I don't think. And then she left and disappeared. So how can you be sure he's an orphan? Frank intervened. The mother might still show up and be reinstated as a parent. That's why I'm sure the director stroked the folder on the table with her palm. That the mother's body was found a week later in the river. She drowned herself. The police say that there are no signs of violence. How horrible. Frank exhaled. He had grown up in a well-to-do family and had not come into contact with such horrors. She's not a drug addict, is she? No, she was a young girl. She was not supposed to be good at all. But how could she? Who did she leave her son for? Apparently, she was at a point where she didn't care anymore. Alex then still said his mother said goodbye to him, told him not to be sad for her and left. When he was brought to us, he was waiting for his mother to come for him. And then one of the teachers here said that his mom died. He's been quiet ever since. Now we don't know what to do with him. If he talks, we'll keep him. If not, we'll have to give him to a special boarding school. We won't have to. Adriana said it's settled. We're taking him. But you can't do that right now, can you? It doesn't work that way. We have to make the arrangements. It'll take time. How? Let's get started on the paperwork. Adriana sounded impatient. Let's get this whole thing over with. I'm sure he won't start talking here at your place, but we have good conditions. The director even took offense. Would you look at what happens in other orphanages? Adriana just waved her hand. After a rather heated discussion about the time when they could take Alex away. But why this boy? Frank asked cautiously as they drove home. Because you don't choose your children. It's my child, and that's all. She answered briefly. And Frank could only explain what had happened by saying that the woman must be feeling something. She's carrying the baby. Maybe the wife sensed something too. A sign from above. Alex did not speak for a long time. Adriana was preparing for his arrival. As Frank tried to crack jokes, literally had the whole house out. The kid's room was filled with toys and balloons. Do you think the boy lived in such conditions? Expressively asked Frank, emphasizing the word such. And you think Alex will not be happy about it? With a question to a question, Adriana answered. Frank only shrugged his shoulders. And Adriana was moved to tears when she led the baby into his room, and he froze on the threshold, not daring to cross it, looking at the bouquets of balloons and the crib from the shelves. The toys were like stepping into a fairy tale. He dared to enter only holding Adriana Soroka tightly. This is all yours examines. Everything gets used, and then we'll have lunch, she told him. Also said a festive was and cake, and different fruits. But when Alex finished the milk from the cup, Adriana had a strange feeling. Only now she realized that this was her home and the most necessary person was near her. In the following days, various little things made her heart clench more than once. Now Adriana always took the boy whenever she went anywhere. To the grocery store, or to the store, or for a walk in the park. When she got to the supermarket, she asked Alex, "What do you want?" "To eat." He walked uncertainly along the shelves. Adriana expected Alex to choose sweets or forget about food and reach for the toys in the basket. He saw the soup sachets with the same ones you use to dilute cups of boiling water and excused himself to them like an old acquaintance. He held out a pen and then looked back at Adriana, asking if she could just nod. He took one bag and carried it in his hands to the cash register. Adriana realized that it was a puzzle of his old life and didn't want to tear it up. Since other moms bought their kids chocolates, she threw a bag of quick soup in the basket. Alex ate any pea, chicken, mushroom, cheese soup. Slowly spooning the soup, thick broken grass, the soup as a treat fished out the breadcrumbs. It was neither healthy nor healthy, but to hell with him. Walking behind Adriana like a shadow he didn't annoy, didn't give, didn't demand attention. All he needed was to make her happy. It was as if he had no energy left in him and a child who ran around, made noise, and could never settle down. So he jokingly calls him an urgy. If Adriana was reading or sewing, Alex would move next to her, put his head on the wooden cushion and stare at her uninterruptedly. His eyes were big with lashes as long as a girl's. Adriana became worried and took her foster son to the doctor. The therapist, who had to see each child for no more than 10 minutes, found the boy weakened. What kind of nutrition did he have? She advised to feed better, prescribed vitamins. And in the summer we will go to the sea, promised Adriana with her son when they left the clinic. You don't know what that is, do you? Yes. She often now had a feeling that could be described with delight and awe. She was about to open up a world to this little man, of which he had no idea, and the sea and seagulls, and cotton candy and rides, and favorite book characters. Everything he had gotten his hands on. He was making her an all-powerful sorceress. To Frank, the boy only went if the man kissed him and approached, stood obediently by his side, listened to what he was told. But as soon as Frank was silent, Alex would rush to his mother again. Adriana tried to befriend her husband and son. She asked Frank to read to the child, sent them both for a walk. But Frank did it awkwardly. It was as if he was embarrassed in his heart and fiddled with the baby through the village. Alex also felt constrained, and they parted with relief. Next to Adriana, Alex spoke imperceptibly. There was no delay. Apparently, it was just the stress he had been through. His first word was still when Adriana was reading him a book, and it ended. Her throat caught, but she pretended it wasn't a big deal and just reached for another batch of stories. Alex never talked idly, not like the other kids who could hardly keep quiet. He could take Adriana's hand and lead her. Let's go when he wanted to show her something interesting. Or asked for something he needed, let me get a drink. In the summer, they did go to the sea. And there Adriana felt for the first time that her husband was jealous of Alex. He was dissatisfied with the fact that they spend little time together, ski, baby to bed, and go somewhere together. We'll go for a walk. He'll wake up and see that no one is there, and he'll get scared. Adriana objected quietly. Come on, the children sleep soundly, leaving the boss on, and let's go. Let's walk along the waterfront. But Adriana shook her head. Go yourself, please. I'll be glad if you have fun, and you can tell me about it later. And on the beach, she was always near Alex, although before she liked to swim far into the sea, and now she was looking for shells together with the child and building sand sledges. And in excursions, they were now limited. They went only to those where the baby could be with them. You've ruined both of our vacations, Frank said in frustration a few days before we left. And I'm sorry, I don't understand this crazy attachment. I mean, it's still someone else's baby. It's no longer a stranger to me. Adriana rarely dared to confront him openly, and I think you treat your own child the same way. No, I wouldn't. Frank has been touched. I think it would have been subconsciously triggered. He'd feel that his son is the most precious thing between us. And about Alex, we agreed it was a trial run in front of our own kid. Kind of like we're relaxing and getting comfortable with the baby we already have, and then we'll be able to have our own. Adriana, looking at her husband, eyes wide open, said almost with fear, I never thought that you treat a small child as a trial balloon for an experiment. I could already see that this reception was costing both me and all my relatives combined. Frank waved his hand and turned the conversation to another topic, but Adriana saw that her husband was deeply offended. In the evening, when she was putting Alex to bed, he suddenly said, Go out with him. Go out with Frank. There was a certain strangeness about it. He didn't call them daddy, mommy called them by their first names. Frank had said more than once that it wasn't right, they should relearn it. But Adriana had objected. Perhaps he still remembers his own mother well and realizes that we are strangers. How am I going to leave? Adriana leaned over in the crib. What about you? I will sleep, said the boy and closed his eyes. That evening, Adriana and her husband took a short walk along the waterfront. The young woman was in a hurry to get to the hotel anyway, and Alex insisted that on the last evening Adriana and Frank went to a restaurant. It was supposed to be a romantic evening. Candles on the table, a girl with a violin, young ladies, wine. They danced. Frank embraced Adriana as tenderly as in the first days of their acquaintance. Then she felt uneasy, and they left early for the hotel. The full moon was burning in the sky. It was a stunning evening, but Adriana had everything in front of her eyes. She had poisoned herself and spent the rest of the night in a room from Kirch in a basin. Frank offered to call a doctor, but she refused. It's a common thing in the South. I should just lie down. After all, there's a train tomorrow. Alex, I nursed her until dawn, brought her water, and just held her hand when she thought she was dying. I didn't have to go. If I'd sat next to you and told you stories, nothing would have happened. What kind of a sissy am I? Did I spoil your last night at sea? He gazed into her face with anxious eyes. It was all nothing, just to make you feel better. Sensing that Adriana had raised her head, Frank stood in the doorway and looked at them. How idyllic is this? Well, I won't intrude. And he closed the door. Adriana cried silently, ignoring him and trying to sleep. I'll sit quietly with you, Alex said. When they got home and life seemed to go on as usual, only Frank emphasized not talking about Alex. It was like he was noticing him less and less. Adriana tried to smooth things over. It was painful for her to lose her husband's good attitude, and she was terribly afraid that Frank would want to return the cause of their discord to the orphanage. She tried more carefully than ever to do her homework, asked her husband about his affairs, was constantly attentive to him, but she could not help admitting to herself that her heart was already given to the boy. When Alex went to school in the first school fall, he fell seriously ill. I was playing with the boys. They were pulling each other out of a puddle. The water was icy in November, and they didn't go home right away. Adriana only gasped when her son came in with a wet coat. It did not help, not a hot bath, not a fiery one, but hot tea with honey. The district doctor listened to the boy and gave 24 hours. If it does not get better by tomorrow, he should go to the hospital without talking. But that very evening, Alex got much worse. He began to choke, and Adriana called an ambulance. At the hospital where they were taken, it was still the old-fashioned way. Alex thought he was big and had to lie down without his mother. Adriana was literally on her knees, praying to keep her son. A paid room, anything. At least for the first while, until he was better, I wouldn't get away from him. After all, exhausted. The elderly doctor took pity on them and put both of them in a box, a small glass cage where the regular ones are. In the first few days after admission, mothers with infants were in the hospital. But Alex was really heavy. They put him on IVs. One by one, oxygen was given. And apparently, to take his mind off his suffering, he asked, "Tell a story." And it didn't occur to Adriana when she was going to the hospital to put a book in her bag. And then, in her haste to fulfill the boy's request, she told him about the magic rats. He was the first to hear the story from beginning to end. Of course, he was interested in the treasure that lurked from many years in a secret place. You never found out who lived there, who hid it all. Inexpensive. I had a feeling from the beginning that none of it was mine. I should give it to my mom, whatever she decides. And later I didn't take an interest in it, but kept it. And the painted boy really looked like me. Like 2 drops of water, she said firmly. She gave it to me very tightly and whispered to me, "I love you." From then on, sometimes, when he was already discharged in the hours they stayed, Alone asked me to tell the story of the rats. Don't you get bored? No, it's true, nobody knows about it. Just the 2 of us, just us. Would you take a rat like that now? You see, nobody asked me. The one that came to me, that's what I took. It was fate, son. He had his hands around my neck. I got everything. I have you. I have love and happiness and wealth. Alex grew up. Daddy never had any children of his own. Losing hope of being a real father. As he talked, Frank convinced his wife to go back to work. You've fallen off the grid. You can't just live a life of domesticity. It's kind of shallow, isn't it? What are you going to remember in your old age, making borscht? You don't want me to sit on your neck, answering questions? What's that got to do with it? Adriana seemed to have completely forgotten what she had learned at school and university. Of course, if she had to remember everything, that wasn't what was important. Work would take up a huge part of her time, energy, and interests. She'd have to take that away from home. Alex, and something was happening to her. It was as if she was always afraid that something might happen to him. That fate would take him away from her. She was afraid for him, not for her husband. Frank spent less and less time at home with Adriana, though, and they no longer quarreled. She tried to please him, avoided asking him questions, and he was condescending and aloof. In high school, Alex became Adriana's second self. They understood each other half-heartedly, and she had no more reliable friend and assistant. Unbeknownst to anyone not at school, he learned to do all the men's work in a labor class, went to help Miranda, who in her old age began to see poorly, took care of her garden. He loved all that beauty. In the spring, he'd bring in boxes of live plants from the grocery store. Most gardeners already have them in season across the river. They won't take them there anyway. And Alex nursed these miraculous living practices. He had some life-giving hands, and the roses bloomed longer than others. And the berries were impossible to pick. I was kind of like a biologist. Adriana said to him with a chuckle to herself, "Maybe you should go into some kind of horticulture. You're clearly inclined, aren't you?" "I don't want to go away. It's a long way to study," she answered. And Adriana realized that he didn't want to leave her. Or maybe there was already a girl. Alex was handsome. It was not uncommon for girls to look at him. But Adriana didn't notice that her son was attracted to anyone. It was the separation from each other. They always took it hard. But Adriana didn't mind. She always knew when it came to Alex, she was a little crazy. And she wants to be in front of him all the time. But you can't do that. You have to fight it. And Alex, when he was once given to summer camp, came home on the 4th day. In the evening after lights out, he climbed out of the window and walked along the highway all night. "What have you done?" she aghast when the sun appeared on the doorstep. "I don't want to stay there. You have to do everything together. You have to be in front of me all the time, walking in formation in the cafeteria, sitting all together sleeping in a room. And the most important thing is that you don't have yourself there." Adriana looked at him with a sad smile. "But you have to become independent." "I won't always be Radha. You're growing up. Independent, but not a cog in the machine. And I want to be there for you, as long as I can. If you asked me to, I'd come and get you. Now you and I are going to have to take the blame. I'll say I made the whole thing up and you didn't know. And I took it and left. First of all, that's the truth. And secondly, I'm not going to let you get scolded because of me." That's what Alex was all about. He was always trying to keep her out of trouble. But as time went on, the older the boy got, the more and more. An agonizing feeling grew on Adriana's soul. Although outwardly the family looked quite prosperous affluence, lack of quarrels, weekends, the three of them were often seen together. They spent time together, sometimes in nature, sometimes they went to the theater or to the premiere of a movie. At all this, Adriana realized that there was Frank, and there was herself together with Alex. Two families in essence, and there was no need for anyone but him. And she, in turn, was the center of his interests, the center of his soul. It was as if Adriana was holding on to the edge of a cliff, and the abyss beneath it was called madness. There was no way this was going to continue. At the same time, she knew she couldn't open up to anyone, not a psychiatrist or a priest in confession. Maybe only Miranda, who herself had made craziness and mistakes at every turn, and therefore no one to judge. When Alex was in the graduating class, there was a girl with him, with whom all the teachers had been tormented for long school years. She always did not find common language with her classmates, made a drama out of any trifle of his. Now because the teacher, in Nancy's opinion, gave her an unfair grade, the girl decided to jump out of the window from the 3rd floor. Almost 100%. It was staged. All Nancy wanted to do was open the frame, stand on the windowsill, promise to step down in front of the whole school, and for the teacher to apologize and never lower her grades again. Then Nancy would graciously agree to stay alive. But Alex didn't understand such nuances. He returned from the cafeteria before the others. He saw Natasha open the window, and in 2 jumps he was next to her and jerked her classmate to the ball. He didn't remember it himself. What did I grab her by? By her hair, it turned out. Nancy hit the back of her head painfully and replayed the play on the fly. She threw a tantrum, saying he'd jumped her and beaten her. Tossed a lump swelling on the back of her head. Half an hour later, Nancy's mother joined the scandal, saying she would write a police report to Alex, put her on the register, and so on and so forth without end. The teachers, who hadn't seen the case, tried to find some kind of compromise. They couldn't blame Alex, who had never been seen doing anything like that. And at the same time, they realized that the girl's mother could get the school in trouble. Adriana was not feeling well that day. She had been thinking since morning that she should probably go to the doctor and have them prescribe her pills for depression. And then she was called back to school. They didn't go home with Alex, and ours was immersed in itself. And Adriana didn't ask him any questions. She understood the need to talk, to explain that this is how life happens. The best intentions could be misunderstood, but that didn't mean that people in trouble should be abandoned to their fate. But Adriana didn't have the strength to have these conversations now. And only when Alex had already gone to bed, he called her. "Do you believe me?" he asked Adriana. He did not specify what she should believe him, but she understood and nodded. "I love you," he said before closing his eyes. She still sat by his bedside until he fell asleep. Alex was small. Realizing that he had finally fallen asleep, she bent over him lightly, touched her lips to his hair, and said in a slightly audible voice, "I love you too. It's just that we missed each other in time." Frank was already asleep too, and no one saw Adriana close the apartment door behind her. She was never found. The next week passed in a confusion of searching conversations with the police and with the investigator. There was no sign of her and no leads. The woman walked out of the house and melted away for sure. Frank could not believe what had happened. He assured him that Adriana would be found. Maybe she had a friend they didn't know about, and she was now holed up at her place. Maybe it happens. She just decided to run away somewhere for a while, bought tickets or stopped a hitchhiker. But she'll be back because she has no one else but them. Miranda had already completely lost her sight by that time, distinguishing only light and darkness. When the police asked about her daughter, Miranda shook her head. "She is not coming back." "How do you know that?" "She contacted you." The policeman slept like that out of sight. Miranda's sightless eyes reflected infinite sadness. She would never leave the boy. If she chose to leave, it would be for good. But she was alive. Miranda did not answer. Hardest of all, Adriana's disappearance had affected Alex. The preschool stories resolved themselves. The teachers spoke to Nancy and her mother in a different tone. The young man's grief had taken a toll on his mother. No one would do it at this time. But Alex no longer cared about all these vicissitudes. For him, the whole world collapsed. Once, when he was very young, his own mother left like that, and now Adriana disappeared without a trace. Did he hear her words, "We've just missed each other in time"? Or was it one of those dreams that, for the rest of his life, he was sure were the holy truth? About what happened to his mother, Alex eventually found out. But Adriana's fate remained unknown. For the first time and forever, Alex had a fight with his foster father, without acting grief-stricken. "I know you have another woman long ago, another family on the side." Frank was amazed. He did not make excuses and asked, "How did you know?" Alex grinned bitterly. "The first time I saw you was by chance in the city. You knew that Adriana hardly ever leaves the house. Didn't try too hard to hide her passy. And then it wasn't hard to guess all those clients who could only meet in the evening or on weekends. All those business calls when you went into the other room with the phone. She knew her too, meant wife. Not to me, she didn't. And if she did, it wasn't from me. I would never say anything to upset her. That was the whole point. The whole time you two were acting like two people in love, so there was no room for me. I couldn't interfere with your relationship. I was redundant 100 times. I wanted to take myself back to the orphanage. But I knew then Adriana would leave me and go with you." Alex turned pale. "And then you didn't care, did you? You just got yourself a new woman. A woman who loves me. And I couldn't leave Adriana. I felt she was going crazy, that any minute now she might have to go to the hospital. It wasn't because of me, it was because of you, son. I was full of venom because it's so small and she's so old." Adriana couldn't accept that. Alex raised his hand as if he wanted to slap his adoptive father. They stood against each other. Then the young man sat down and hid his face in his palms. Frank realized that he was crying. "I'm leaving," Alex said. "Thank God. Where to?" You think Adriana didn't want you to finish school, and you're about to start your exams. I finished school. I'm staying at Miranda's. She can't be alone right now. You're bringing your friend here, and you seem to have your own son. So you have a lot to compare your feelings for your own kid to someone else's. What's the advice? Love. Miranda took Alex in like he was meant to live here. This was Adriana's home. Now it's your home too, she said. Alex fell from zero and by heart at those words. Even his mother had talked about Adriana in the past. But living with Miranda seemed easy to him. She had retained her character even to old age. She took little to heart and was not afraid of anything, not even death. In the house, she learned to move by feel her very rarely crashed into something Ronaldo brewed coffee in an automatic coffee maker, generously added to a cup of brandy. She listened to music, sometimes quietly singing and dancing. On weekends, she often had friends over. And if you didn't look into the room, but listened to the laughter, the shouts of melody, you could think that a young company gathered there. Frank, whom Alex had never once called father. He did exactly as Alex had predicted. He brought in a young girl, Maria, who had long been his real wife and had borne him a son, Sam. He found what he was looking for. Maria worked in a company for his partner, sat in the office one smile, and I was worth 1 million. And himself did not understand why she agreed to date him, and then for years resigned herself to the role of mistress. I want the real thing. After all this surrogate, just the real 1 million men screaming saying the wife is sick, and that's why they can't file a divorce. I know you're not lying, and that you desperately want to leave a family that doesn't appreciate you, but you don't. Your dad is really sick, and you can't take care of her as a boy. But there will come a time when you'll be free, and then you'll be with me. And not because I'm young and pretty, but because you love me. I can see that. If I'm 1 in 1 billion, there's only 1 in 1 billion like you. That's what Maria meant. He thought as he picked out gifts for various holidays. He was happy to do crazy things for her, buy expensive rare things, and get something for Adriana and Alex. When Maria gave birth to Sam, Frank felt for the first time that life had found meaning. Sometimes they lay down and dreamed about how they would live, where they would go, what they would do. But there was no telling when it would all happen. Maria, with a smile, lowered him from heaven to earth. What exactly? When and how? But God will not punish us. It's not like we wish the war any harm. We just want it to go away on its own somehow, right? Maybe she'll fall in love and go off with someone else. He shook his head. She's already fallen in love, and it's incurable. Frank sobbed at the wake he had decided to hold for Adriana. She was still missing. He agonized, waiting for the denouement and wishing for some kind of closure. You can search for years, so we're looking for one woman. The musician left the house, went for a walk in the evening, told her mother that she would buy bread at the same time, and nobody has seen her since. If not found within the first few days of disappearance, get ready for it to take a long time. But Frank could wait no longer. He summoned acquaintances of distant loved ones, and in their presence cried Adriana as if dead. I'm sure she'll never be found again. Everything was leading up to it, and the state of mind, lately tears, depressed with fat. In short, freak out, said a mutual acquaintance, who herself had views on Frank all her life did not work. So she went off the rails. Alex, of course, did not attend the wake. The next day, Frank brought home Maria and his son, and closed the door behind him, and locked the young woman in his arms. Freedom, freedom. Maria, we are finally free. Do you believe it? A few weeks later, they left for the sunny south, the trip they'd long dreamed of. Frank was right. His own son didn't bother him one bit. From time to time, once every few months, Frank called Alex, spoke in a polite, neutral voice, asked if everything was all right. If Alex needed anything, maybe some money to give. To all questions, the young man answered, "Thank you, I don't need anything." In these first and most difficult years, his grandmother became Alex's salvation. Sometimes they sat together near the fireplace, and Alex looked at the familiar features that had so much in common with his foster mother. Only with her. Miranda Alex had spoken to Adriana once. "You think she's dead?" he asked. "Then why haven't I ever seen you cry? Not even Frank. Why should I cry?" How long do I have left? We'll see each other soon anyway. At least in the other world. So you think he couldn't go on? Miranda put her hand on her chest, wore a few moments, definitely listening, then simply said, I know, and how. There was a harshness in Miranda's voice, in the way she herself had decided. She never brought up the subject again. But Alex still long went to the river, to the place where, as they said, they had found the body of his own mother. He looked at the water for hours and waited for some epiphany. But the secret never came out. He did well on his exams. He could have shown. But with Adriana gone, everything in his soul was extinguished. Average grades were enough. Instead of the army, he did alternative service. Couldn't leave Miranda and didn't care that he was a pacifist. There was no problem. The city hospital needed orderlies badly. He helped carry the sick and did all the dirty hard work that is so necessary, which young people are so often reluctant to take on, especially for next to nothing. But Miranda had enough money that they were not in need. And Alex knew himself. To the material side of life, he wasn't demanding to the point of outrage. Miranda gave him complete freedom and never talked about the choice of further life path or marriage. Sweet boy, you have your own head on your shoulders, and I'm too tired to take responsibility for someone else's life. She tried to serve herself to the last and asked surprisingly little to buy a bottle of her favorite cognac or bring a CD of this or that musician. And shortly before her death, she asked to take her to the sea and thinks that the old crust has finally lost its mind. Said Miranda and red hair with the same movement as when she was young. I just want to say goodbye to my favorite corner. He became alarmed. You don't feel well. She looked at him over her glasses, which had long since been practically useless. If you're asking about the other side of the world, I'm off to a low start. But we'll get to the sea in time. It was one of the strangest trips of Alex's life. Miranda held him tightly under his arm and behaved in a way that people didn't immediately realize she could hardly see. They settled into a hotel simple and cheap on the beach itself, so that, sitting on the balcony, one could hear the noise of the sea. This accommodation had one disadvantage: the embankment under the windows. In the evening, from each cave carried its own music, smelled kebabs, fried corn, some spices. They were selling bottled beer, swings were flying up into the sky. Miranda sat on the balcony with a cigarette until dawn, a real extravaganza. That's what I wanted, she said. They came back. The summer ended. And in the fall, Miranda fell ill, and 2 days later she was gone. The writer's house, where she had lived most of her life, she bequeathed to some charitable foundation, and left Alex the apartment she had once bought for herself and her daughter. Alex worked in the emergency services. At one time, he thought about medical school. He had already seen a lot, but at the same time felt that he couldn't live 24 hours a day for the sick, like the few doctors he admired. He needed at least some time alone with himself, with his thoughts, with his soul. He worked shifts at the emergency ministry. There was no special romance. Most of the time they called him to open the doors of apartments locked by carelessness. Sometimes asked to take down from the tree favorite cat or cat. To rescue a favorite animal from trouble. In the heyday of overseas disease, ambulances were knocked down and often had to help transport heavy patients to the hospital. Sometimes worked in conjunction with firefighter divers. Maybe Alex went into this field because he hoped to learn something about Adriana. At least from someone's memories, maybe a broken thread would lead to where we are now. In his free time, Alex often wandered the streets. He was brought to those parts of the city where the yards resembled wells, and the houses were barely holding on from old age, and it was obvious that they were about to be demolished. Narrow streets, the smell of damp. He spoke to these houses to himself, of course, lest he be thought crazy. Touching the palm of his hand, the rough walls. Asked to himself if they had heard that about Adriana. Then the city decided to lay a new subway line. That's what they said. 6 dozen houses were going to be demolished because they couldn't withstand the underground tracks. The usual squabbles began, cynical on the one hand and desperately fruitless on the other. People who had lived in these houses for a century resisted moving, especially since they were always offered minimal money, just enough to buy a shabby house somewhere in the suburbs. Alex knew what would happen next. People would be evicted from their homes anyway. They would be demolished on the empty places. They would build elite buildings that would not be hindered by any subway and sell them for 3 times the price. Some people accepted it and left. Others said that they would not leave their homes until the last. Let them be bulldozed together with them. They were talking about stone buildings. Alex remembered that when they were going to demolish houses, wooden people showed similar intransigence. The dwellings were simply burned down. Who was doing it? No one knew. They never found the end of it. The houses were always burning at night. There were times when people couldn't escape in time. Once they saved a mother and her children. Some rare medicine for the youngest child was not pulled out of the fire. The other day, volunteers gave an announcement about collecting money in social networks to buy this drug. And now Alex has been called to one such house. There the grandmother disappeared, does not come, and in the room crying. The child explained on the phone an agitated woman. We already wanted to break the doors, but decided not to act ourselves. Let the professionals, so that we are not accused of anything bad later. You did absolutely right. The dispatcher responded. Opening a lock old doors is not such a big job. And Alex didn't think he'd be here long. He'd never been down this street before. If Miranda were alive, she would have explained to him that this was the very house and the very communal apartment where he and Adriana used to live. A woman of about 42, in a shabby robe, met him in the entryway. The grandmother lives with us, the grandmother who came here. Honestly, I agree to move just to get rid of such a neighborhood of rats. She breeds them. Imagine others are poisoned, but she breeds the whole house with her own hands, and they run away from her. Ew. Alex was already climbing the stairs, and we warned her that we will call the station, or as it is now called, the office, and all this contingent eliminate. So she put the critters in a bag today and went to the market. She says she's gonna give it away to people. Who's gonna get their hands on that filth? You know, every time she leaves the house, I hope in my heart that she won't come back. She's not an old woman, she's a witch. And then she's gone. And then we hear someone crying in the room. We start knocking, but there's only sobs. Then we called the Ministry of Emergency Situations. Alex answered in the words of the dispatcher. You did the right thing. That's what I think. And maybe when you open the door, we still call some service. Let them examine the room in your presence and take pictures. Impose some kind of fine on the grandmother for sanitary condition. We'll see there. This is the door. This is it. Alex noticed that he was surrounded by several women. They were curious neighbors. Apparently, the old lady didn't let them into her room, and they didn't know what was being done there behind the door. He took out his tools. It was quiet behind the door. It didn't take Alex more than a minute to open it. Perhaps the roommates immediately noticed the situation, like the rodent rats stirring on the back of the table. Perhaps Alex only saw the girl standing in the back of the room. 2 short pigtails, just below her shoulders, a museum dress. The way children were dressed long ago. Breasts. The girl was cradling a large gray rat that didn't seem to be trying to get away. The girl was the spitting image of Adriana, as he had seen her in pictures. The resemblance was so complete that he closed his eyes. Look, you're a child. Where did she get her from? The girl is your grandmother's own grandmother, yes. Remembered behind the neighbor's back. We were again separated in time. I wanted to say Alex and could not. Instead, he asked, "What's your rat's name?" "It's Love," said the girl. "That's right."
Subscribe and click the bell. Camille was often home alone. She was so tired of it that she wanted someone to be there for her. Her mother was always at the office. She worked as a bookkeeper for the village council, so she often stayed late. "Camille, are you asleep? Did a woman come in the house?" "No," she came out of her room. "Then let's have dinner." She put the groceries from her bag on the table. "Okay. Why did you take so long again today?" "Look, that's what I get paid for. I need to make sure there are no mistakes." The woman didn't like the subject. Good. Her daughter agreed with her. They ate and then went to bed. In the morning, the girls had to go to school, and the mother had to get up for work again. "Hello." Stephen met her on the way. "Hello. Camille. I liked him. How are you?" He picked up the girl's briefcase. "Fine." She was coloring. "We'll go out tonight?" he asked simply. "Okay." They were already approaching the school porch. "But what did he say to you?" Evelyn's best friend came up to her. "Nothing." She was still staring at the guy's back. "Well, Camille, tell me, it was interesting. Is it okay that we're going out tonight?" The girl confessed. "Did you say yes to that?" Evelyn was sure that Camille would torment him for a long time. "How much longer?" "School will be over soon. He'll just leave. And I'll be left with my pride." She was sure of it. "Look at you. Anybody could take you." She was sure of it. "Thank you for the compliment, of course. But I wish it was Stephen." She blushed again. They went to class, and lessons began. But Camille didn't care about them. She thought only of the young man. The class dragged on slowly. It was boring. Finally, everything was over. The girl went out into the schoolyard, but Stephen was not there waiting. Caught up with her Camille. "Leave me alone," could not bear to be under the floorboards of her friend Camille any longer. She went home for lunch and decided to do her homework. She couldn't think of anything to do. She looked out the window every now and then. When it was 6:00 p.m., he came. At first, Camille wanted to run out to meet him, but after a moment she thought that would be rash. Sitting back down on the table, there was a knock on the window. Camille looked out, smiled, and shook her head to indicate that she was about to come out. "Hi." He was grinning from ear to ear. "Why so happy?" Though shy, she spoke confidently. "I saw you." He didn't hide the fact that he liked the girl. "Let's go." She smiled and pulled him by the hand. They went to the riverbank. It was a favorite place for all young people. But Stephen and Camille did not want anyone to see them. They decided to go further to the fisherman's cottage, which had long been abandoned. "Come here." He gave her a hand so she wouldn't fall through on the bridge, where the boards were already cursed. "Thank you." She jumped to the ground and fell right into his arms. Now he went to the doors and tried to open them, but nothing worked. Then Stephen took a piece of iron that was lying here on the ground, slipped it under the boards, piled on, and the door held nothing. Camille could only say. They stepped inside. The place smelled of musty netting. There were old nets around, dirty rags, some kind of mattress. "Come here," the boy beckoned her. They laid that very mattress against the wall with another flake thrown on it. They made themselves comfortable. Across from where they sat there was a small window that overlooked part of the trees and the sky. Beautiful. Camille sat in Stephen's arms. "Like you," he whispered in her ear. "What?" She laughed and turned to him. "You're beautiful." He touched her hair that had gotten out of its ponytail. Their faces were very close together. Stephen couldn't help himself. He kissed Camille. "You what?" She got away from him and blushed. "I love you." He held her hands. "What are you saying? What kind of love can there be at our age?" She said it. She didn't want him to let her go. "Come to me." He pressed down on her chest again. She could smell him. She liked him. Stephen stroked her head, her back, her neck. They were nice touches. He leaned in, kissed her. First on her temple, then on her shoulder, then down to her neck. Camille froze. The guy just stroked her and kissed her. "I can't." She made him do it. What was he like coming to his senses? She turned on her back, planted her lips on his. Stephen leaned into her. It was an unusual feeling. The young people gave in to an impulse of tenderness. They were both inexperienced and did everything out of inertia. "I will never leave you," he whispered to her. "I love you," she answered him. They lay like that on the old mattress for a long time. Stephen held her in his arms. Camille drowned in those arms. It was time to go home. He kissed her. Yes. She stood up and looked at him and smiled. They walked out of the cabin, closing the door to make it look like it was like that. Stephen walked along with Camille to her house until he came close to her and said, "This is Stephen's hair." She hugged him until tomorrow. He kissed her on the cheek as if he was afraid someone would see. Camille walked into the house. She couldn't believe all that had happened. Her body was burning. She could still remember kissing Stephen. What were you looking at her like that for? Emily. What girl didn't understand? I don't know. The woman shrugged. You don't know, but you ask. The girl was embarrassed. It seemed to her that everyone could see and understand what had happened to her today. She lay on the bed and thought about her boyfriend, and she had never felt so good before. She thought it was for life. Now they would graduate from high school, and a whole different life would begin. Stephen would be the master of their family and home. Hi. He caught up with her the next day on her way to school. Hello. She came up to him. But the guy didn't hug her for some reason. Later, he looked around again. I feel like you're embarrassed of me. She was offended. What are you saying? He took her hand. They walked to the school. Stephen went back to his friends, and Camille stayed standing by the porch. Hi. Evelyn came up behind her. Scared her. Her friend turned to her. Why are you cursing like that? Am I so scary? The girl laughed. Oh, Evelyn, don't start. Camille looked at where her lover was standing. What's wrong with him? The girlfriend was also looking in the same direction as Camille. Look at him. Isn't he handsome? She said it with fondness. Girlfriend, I see we've lost you. You're gone. You've made your point, Evelyn. The bell rang and all the boys entered the school building. In class, they didn't want to think about anything but the young man. Camille remembered her feelings from the day before. It had been inexpressible. When the lessons were over, she hurried towards the exit. She didn't want the boy to leave without her. But she didn't have time, because Stephen was nowhere to be found. That skittered away already laughed by her friend behind her back. Evelyn, leave me alone. It hurt Camille that he did not wait for her. And she found home alone. But when she had only a few meters to go, she heard someone calling her. Why are you hiding here? She came to the bushes. Where did Stephen call her from? I'm not hiding from you. I'm waiting. He seemed offended. So there she was. She's in front of him. You come here. He beckoned her to him. Now Camille looked around, and York to where her boyfriend was. To what you're looking back, he laughed. Shut up. She blushed again. Yes, she realized now what she was so embarrassed about, Stephen. The village was small. Everyone knew each other. There was no need for anyone to tell her mother about them. Come on. He winked at her. Okay. Let's at least leave the bags at home. She looked at her large briefcase. Okay. They walked down the path that led to the girl's house. There they ditched, I'll show you, and headed to the house where they'd spent time yesterday. Sorry. He tucked a strand behind her ear as they lay back on the same mattress. It was okay. She loved being around him so much. That's how it would always be. Would you like to be my wife? The young man asked. He leaned back. Would you take it? She doubted it. First of all, it was still short summer. And secondly, they had only been dating for a couple of days. Why not? Here graduated from school, went somewhere, and then you can think about marriage. He spoke dreamily. Camille realized that it would happen, but not so soon. So she forbade herself to think about it. He turned to her and embraced her. She brought her face close to his. You're so beautiful. He began to kiss her. I love you. She responded to those kisses. Again today, they spent the whole day in their private place. Camille was free to come and go from the house. No one knew where or with whom she was. Her mother, as always, was very busy, so the daughter did what she wanted. But until tomorrow, they said goodbye at the gate. The mother entered the girl's house, but there was silence in return. They started going out with Stephen. No girlfriends, walks and discos Camille didn't need anymore. She wanted to be only with him. She saw nothing else. Why don't you get up? Their mother came to them in the morning. I can't. I feel sick, Camille answered. I see something very pale. Emily touched her head. I'm not going. For school today, Camille bowed her head off the bed. She spun around nicely, petted her mother. The woman left and Camille remained lying in the bed. It was a pity only one thing she would not meet Stephen. But the girl was wrong. Already in the afternoon, he was outside her house. Camille shouted to him at the gate. She heard, but could not even get up to open to him. The guy did not hesitate, stuck his hand in the hole, pulled the deadbolt, and entered the yard unhindered. "You're home." He was already in the kitchen. "Come in." He heard from the room where the girl was lying. "What's wrong?" Did he see that she didn't say hello? "I don't know." She lay on her back, but at that moment a fit of nausea came up to her throat again. "To sit with you," he came closer, and if you don't mind me saying so, it was immediately different with him. The nausea receded a little, even the poverty was gone. He sat down on the edge of the bed, took Camille's hand in his. It was cold. "Why are you all friendly?" He was worried about her. "I can't say." She looked up at him. Maybe the doctor's. Was he ready to run to the nurse's station? "No, don't. It'll get worse. I'll go myself." She stopped him. So they sat there until the evening. The girl felt better. She even got up. They drank tea. "I have to go." Stephen hugged the girl. Camille continued to study. Sometimes she felt as bad as that time. "Don't you think you eat too much?" The other night she asked Emily, "Mom, are you going to reproach me with food?" I couldn't believe it, could you? No, look at the way she did it. The woman pointed to her waist area. Camille noticed it herself. Her favorite skirts and dresses didn't fit her. She was nervous about it, but she put it down to the fact that she had been eating more lately. "And you are ready not so tasty." The girl laughed. "That's what you said." Mom smiled affectionately at her daughter. But by spring it became noticeable that this fullness is not just for nothing. "Come here." Her mother called her then. What Camille came up to her. The woman pulled up the dress her daughter was wearing. Not for nothing the neighbor told me that Emily clutched her head. "Mom, what were you looking at?" "At her and your belly." "Are you stupid? You don't understand anything." She pointed her finger. "No." "Why?" Camille began to suspect something wrong, but she was afraid to even think about it. "You're pregnant." "Where did she go out?" The woman asked. "Mommy." The girl cried. She sat down on the stool that stood next to her. "What, Mom?" Hugged her daughter and cried. "Emily, Stephen." Camille did not look at her, seeing him here. What a bunch of students. The woman was indignant. Now a girl came out of the house. "I don't understand what happened." She dragged Stephen by the hand to her house. "You'll understand now." Camille was angry with him. "Well, Vitek, what shall we do?" The woman stood by the feathers with her hands at her sides. "What am I to you, Vitek?" That looked at Camille, and he was scared. "And who else? Are you going to have a child soon?" She pointed at her daughter that he sat down and covered his eyes with his hands. "How am I going to face the neighbors now? They will say that with my work I have abandoned my daughter." The woman screamed. I don't know how it could have happened. Stephen was confused. He didn't know where to look. But I know how to hit on girls, so he knows. But how do you answer for it? She didn't finish. What do we do now? The guy was talking to Camille's mom. It's like it never happened. What do we do? Do what? Play the wedding, Emily said firmly. But we're still in school. He went back to doing whatever it was he was doing. So school was not brought up. The woman went to her room. How? He whispered to Camille silently. She was shocked by everything that was happening. It was necessary to inform her parents. But how to do it? The guy had absolutely no idea. He didn't want to go home that day. But he didn't have to say anything to anyone. When Stephen entered the house, his mother and father were sitting in the kitchen waiting for him. Did you already know? The boy guessed. How could you? All his life broken girls, and himself mother was determined. But now she could not resist and cried. That's enough. What are you all talking about? I'll take her as my wife, and we'll have a baby. It'll be a real family. He wanted to go to his room, but his father stopped him. Where will you live? He held his son's hand. "We'll figure it out." I didn't want to talk about it. The boy, "We'll figure it out." He exhaled a man's breath. From that day on, the whole village did nothing but talk about the case. Each time the news got more and more interesting. Camille was already pregnant, not by Stephen, but by someone unknown. And he just took pity on her, took her under his wing. The girl's mother agreed with the chairman, and he agreed to marry the young people. It so happened that at the graduation stood no longer a guy and a girl, but a husband and wife. "Will you live here?" strictly said Camille's mother. It was better for the girl then. "I'll go. I'll try to get a job," said Stephen. All plans to study in the city and move there were put off. Or maybe they weren't meant to come true. At first, the guy pretended to be a family man. A healthy girl was born, whom the parents named Jenna. Husband brought money into the family to take care of his daughter. But when he got the summons, his joy and zeal diminished. How could it be? Camille wondered. How can I be alone? She cried every day. But there was nothing they could do about it. Stephen went into the service. "Will it be hard?" Emily told her. "I realized that myself." Camille was afraid to be alone, but her parents, Stephen and her mother, helped her with everything. Jenna was an active child. She was always busy. Camille looked at her and realized that she was still a child herself, but she already had her own. She wrote letters to her husband in the army. He answered, but unlike Camille, he rarely did. He came back. His daughter was over 2 years old. Didn't recognize her at first. "Stephen, how long has it been since we've seen each other?" Camille pressed them to him. But all that tenderness, he turned his back on her. When he came to the army, he saw that it was possible to live differently from the village. Now he wanted something different. He regretted the way things had turned out between him and Camille. And if he could turn back the clock now, he wouldn't look at her at all. "Stop sitting here," his mother-in-law told him. "I want to sit here." He poured himself another shot. "My wife and child missed you here." "And there you are." Emily stood and fed him. "I need to get used to it," he said, and realized that he had no feelings for his wife anymore. What was that about? The mother didn't understand. To everything snapped at the young man. "Oh, everything is clear with you. Do not need it will be brave. Get up. Leave." She went to the room where her granddaughter was sleeping. "And that's what I'll do." Stephen sneered. He got up from the stool, staggered, took his papers, and left the house. "Mom, where's Stephen?" Camille came back from the store. "Gone quietly," said Ta didn't understand. It was the girl's turn to be surprised. "He said he needed to get used to you." I showed him the door. The woman was minding her own business. "How could you do that?" Camille cried. "Don't cry. You don't deserve to cry for him. He spoiled a girl, gave birth to a child, and then he went to the bushes. I guess he didn't like it." Emily came up and hugged her daughter. "What about us?" She didn't understand. Tears rolled from her eyes. "It's okay. You're still young. You'll find a groom." She wiped her daughter's tears. The paperwork had to be done. When 6 months passed and Stephen never came back, Camille decided to divorce him. Mom helped with everything. I wondered, why had Stephen's parents stopped communicating with their ex-daughter-in-law and granddaughter? But no one asked them that. Well, guess what? One evening, Mom and daughter were sitting at the table, and Jenna ran the same look at the woman Camille. "Why don't you go to the city, get an education, get a job? Maybe you're looking for a normal husband." Emily reasoned. "What about Jenna?" She looked at her daughter. "Why doesn't she stay with me for a while?" "And how are you going to do that?" "You'll come back for her right away." The grandmother bent down and took her granddaughter in her arms. "Well, I thought about it too, but I didn't dare to tell you. I thought maybe you wouldn't agree." Camille hugged her mom. Once we'd talked about it, that was the end of it. Camille gathered all her papers and went to conquer the city. Everything was new there. Not often had to get out of the village. The girl applied, enrolled. She was provided with a dormitory, moved in. When she lived with her mother and daughter, She did not think that there was such a strong connection between them. And now, when she was alone in a strange city, she felt the lack of relatives. Just because she was so sad, her roommate Wendy came over to her. "I miss my daughter." She put a picture on the table. "Wow, such a young and already so big daughter." The girl was surprised. "Yes, but I don't regret anything." Camille stroked the image of Inga, not sad. "Sometimes you have to make sacrifices." The neighbor gave wise advice. "I'm trying." She stood up, went to the light switch to turn off the light. Studying wasn't hard. Camille did it with pleasure. She was preparing for the subject, snapping the tasks like peanuts. By the end of the session, there was almost no need to take exams. Everything was put by automatic. "Home for the holidays?" Wendy asked. "Yes, she missed you very much. I can't wait to see you." Camille wanted to go shopping for a doll for her daughter, and then go. "I'll see you later." They hugged each other. There were a lot of people in the store. Everyone wanted to please the children on this fabulous holiday. Sorry, Camille felt like she stepped on someone's foot. A man had just cleaned his shoes and was looking at them. "I didn't do it on purpose." Camille really didn't mean it. She pulled a handkerchief out of her pocket. "I wanted to get my mark off the victim's shoe." "You what?" He grabbed her arm. "I'm sorry again." The girl couldn't find other words. "Let's go." He took her to the place where there were the least people. Why? She didn't understand what this man wanted from her. Now he sat down and rubbed his shoes with some kind of cloth a couple of times, and everything was as it had been before. "I should probably go." I saw Camille. There weren't so many customers at the register. "Wait, I'll come with you." And he went up. "Okay." She was already headed that way. "My name is Christopher. Camille heard about you from behind." "Camille." She didn't turn around. "Buy a doll for your sister." He pointed to the beautiful toy in the girl's hands. "My daughter is waiting for me for the holidays at her grandmother's." She did not begin to sly. She didn't go on with anything. Christopher. He was buying something too. And when he went outside, saw Camille crossing the street, caught up with her. "Can I walk you out?" He walked beside her. "I think you already do." She smiled. Camille thought to herself, is it so easy to step on a man's foot in a store? And in the next moment you had already made an acquaintance. She liked Christopher. He was solid in a coat with a briefcase and an umbrella. "You're going somewhere?" He was looking at the big bag in her hand. "Yes, I live in the country and now I'm studying here. For the holidays I decided to visit my mother and daughter," Camille said casually. "Let me help you." He held out his hand to take the bag. "Thank you." She was really grateful because the luggage was heavy. They reached the train station, stopped. "Camille, I'll see you again." He'd like that very much. "Why not?" She saw her bus pulling up. "Then tell me where you live in the city, and I'll be sure to come." He looked in the same direction as her. "Yes," she nodded and dictated the address to him. Before meeting, he stood looking at her through the glass of the bus. Till with only one lip the girl spoke. On the road she looked at, glimpsed trees, but did not see them. She thought about her new acquaintance. Finally, the familiar outline of houses appeared ahead. A smile appeared on the girl's face. She imagined how Jenna would greet her now. She got off the bus and headed towards her house. Everything was familiar here. Camille greeted the locals along the way. She was already at her gate when she saw Stephen. "Hi." He came up to her. "What are you doing here?" She didn't feel like talking to this man. "I wanted to ask how you were doing." The girl could see he was drunk. She pushed him a little and went through the gate. He didn't dare follow her. "Daughter." "Hi." She's out on the porch. "Emily, why did you come out here to meet me on purpose?" "You couldn't figure out Camille." "No, I thought your ex-husband was gonna fight again." She pointed to the gate. "Isn't this the first time?" The girl was very surprised why no one had told her about it before. "Yes, I'm sorry I didn't tell you." The mother entered the house, waiting for her daughter to catch up with her. What does he want here? All sorts of thoughts about the baby and everything else immediately began to pop into her head. Nothing to drink or money for a bottle. She heard the answer to her question. Wow. Camille stood up and froze. There was no telling how long she would stand like that, and what she would think about. Mom came out of the room, Hurricane Jenna high, hugged her. What took you so long? The girl clutched at her mother's neck. I'm sorry, sweetheart, but we'll be together soon. She knew she would be. Okay, granddaughter, let mommy pass. Her grandmother took her in her arms. I missed you so much. Camille looked at her mother. Yes, let's go to the table. They all sat there together. So, are you ready for the party? Leaning over to the baby, Camille. No, we don't even have a Christmas tree. The little girl said sadly. That's okay. We'll find one today. Her mom kissed her. Yay, started jumping around the kitchen. As Camille had promised, she bought a small Christmas tree. They set it up in the room, decorated it with toys, and now the holiday felt real. And the presents. Looking under the tree. Girl, wait. Santa Claus hasn't gotten to our house yet. Camille laughed. Overnight, she prepared everything, packed everything nicely, and tomorrow. As soon as they sat down at the table, she would put it all under the holiday tree. Everything went just as Camille had planned. Her daughter was so excited about the doll that she did not sit at the table at all. And when the women came into the room, they only smiled when they saw her sleeping again with the toy in her arms. But how are you doing in town? Asked Emily. Finally, they could talk amongst themselves. It's fine. There really wasn't much to tell. She didn't want to talk about the latest acquaintances because nothing was clear. Okay, when you want to say something, don't be shy. They raised their glasses, congratulated each other, had a drink after the sit-down, put the dishes away and went to their room. Well, it was time for me to go to school again. Camille has been home for a week. May all be well. Mother and daughter hugged her. I will miss you very, very much. The girl cried. Just like me, Camille did not want to cry, but one tear traitorously slipped down her cheek. That's it. Emily took her hand and went to escort her to the gate, while the girl headed towards the station. Back at the dormitory, everything was the same as before. Nothing had changed in the week they hadn't been there. They had to start studying again. Camille, there's someone here to see you. One of the students came into her room. Thank you. She wondered who it could be. When the girl came downstairs, she saw Christopher, as she expected. Today he was wearing a tracksuit, which looked very young for a young man. Yes, young. It was the first time Camille had seen him in an overcoat and thought he was a man. Hello, she went up to him. I couldn't wait for all these holidays to be over. He looked up. The janitor was standing there watching them. He gave Camille his hand and looked toward the exit. The girl understood immediately. She said that she had to change her clothes, and in a minute she would be outside. That was the deal. Where are you going? Wendy stood looking at her. Camille didn't usually leave the dormitory at all. I'll tell you all about it later. The roommate was embarrassed. She grabbed her jacket, put on her shoes, and walked out into the hallway. Christopher stood on the porch. Well, that's it. I'm ready. She walked up to him. I'm really excited about this. He looked her over from head to toe. They walked just down the street. When they reached a bench that stood in the shade of a tree, they decided to sit down and talk. I can't explain it, but there in the store, when you stepped on my foot, I liked you right away, Christopher began to tell her. Of course, I can't say that. Then was very much frightened. She did not look at him, but later I can say that she also paid attention. They were sitting like two schoolboys who couldn't admit their feelings for each other. On the one hand, it was funny, but on the other hand, it was only the second time they had seen each other. Let's go to the movies tomorrow, asked Hiroke. Camille was thinking about something. How long have you been a student here? I wanted to know more about her. 6 months. For some reason, she felt embarrassed by that answer. Why do you answer like that? He couldn't understand. A lot of people in my class say I'm a late enrollee, but I think it's never too late to study. Camille pulled some kind of wrapper out of her pocket and now cupped it in her hands. Why are you even thinking about this? When you got in, you got in. Maybe you didn't get the education you wanted, and now to re-educate yourself. He didn't understand what the problem was. They chatted some more, walked around town, and Christopher went to see her off. Because Camille said there was something else to prepare for school. Don't forget about the movie, he told her on the porch. Sure enough, she walked into the dorm, cheeks burning. She went up to her room. Tell me you're on a date. Wendy sat her down right away. Yeah, on a date, she told her cryptically. So, who is he? Where did you two meet? The neighbor was curious about everything. Camille told her how they had bumped into each other in the store, and after that Christopher had already recognized her. Wow, what a way to go. Some people go to bars, restaurants, clubs, and can't meet anyone. And you just stepped in the store. She laughed on his foot. Oh, Wendy, don't be silly. We don't know anything yet. Camille didn't want to rush things as usual. Christopher came every day. It was very pleasant. He was smart. Camille liked to talk to him about different subjects. By the time the warmth came, the girl was planning to go to her village again because there were long holidays ahead. Are you sure you don't want to take me with you? Christopher asked her. Do you really want to? She didn't know what to do or how to be. You know, I'm that kind of person. If I do something, I do it thoroughly. If I choose you, I want it once and for life. He took her hands and turned her around to face him. So now do you want to go to my village to meet my mom? She concluded, how smart are you? He kissed her. Okay, let's go. Didn't we agree on a place to meet tomorrow? Camille was very worried. What are you so worried about? Wendy asked her tonight. It's not every day you bring your fiancé to meet your mom, she said. What's the big deal? Well, he's a good guy to meet. Or what are you worried about? My friend didn't understand. How will Jenna take it all? Camille sighed. Yeah, she'll take it fine. A man who's adequate should please the girl. Let him buy her candy. That's all it takes, Wendy advised. All right. Camille adjusted her pillow and lay down. It took her a while to fall asleep because she had different thoughts in her head, but eventually she fell asleep. In the morning, she went to her vapor classes, and after them, she could go to the train station. Camille saw from afar that Christopher was already sitting there, waiting for her. Various thoughts came into her head again as to how she would bring him to the village. What would she tell her mother? After all, she had never told her about any young men, and now she'd come at once with her fiancé. But if she decided to do it, she had to do it. So she approached him from behind. And I'm waiting for you. He stood up and put his arm around her. Are you really ready to go to my mom? She asked him that question again. Of course I am. Why do you ask every time? He couldn't understand. They got on the bus and drove down the road, talking a lot. Camille showed him different places she'd been. Beautiful views of the river. There's not much green now, but when it's in full bloom, you'll see how beautiful it will be. She promised him. They were approaching the station when Camille spotted Jenna. For some reason, she got even more excited. Just as they got off the bus, Christopher heard Mommy running towards her girl. Hi, honey. She sat down and hugged her daughter. How are you here? Grandma said that there are long holidays ahead, and most likely you will come to us. So we came to meet you. Territory, girl. Suddenly, she stopped and looked at Christopher. Meet Christopher, her mom told her. Hi, Uncle Christopher. She held out her hand to him. Hi, he said to her and took a candy bar out of his pocket. Oh, thank you. I like that kind of candy, she said. All this time, Camille's mother stood by and watched the scene. Of course, she didn't interfere in her daughter's affairs. She decided that later, when there was time, they would talk privately. Christopher, I'd like you to meet my mom. She brought him over to a woman. Nice to meet you. He extended his hand to her, and she shook it. After that, we all went home. For some reason, it was so peaceful. Emily, I didn't just come here, Christopher said that evening when they were gathered around the table, and I realized it. The woman glanced at her daughter. I like Camille very much, and I would like her to be my wife. He reached into his inside pocket and pulled out a ring. That's a good one. And he didn't say a word. Camille looked at the gift. What about Uncle Christopher becoming my daddy? Running around Jenna. Anything's possible. Camille put the stir chain on her finger. They were sitting. Camille put her hand on her head. Sitting there, watching, seeing how happy her daughter was. Then she left them at home, went to her friend's house. You have a good mom, said Christopher Camille. Yeah, she put the little girl on the stairs. All right, baby, let's get to know each other. He tickled her, yeah. She laughed. This time the couple could only stay here for 3 days. After that, Camille had to go to school and Christopher to work. Jenna, Mom will be on vacation now, and we'll come and get you. A young man sat down in front of her. Yay, and I'll live with you. She was already happy about something that hadn't happened yet. Yes, he looked up at Camille. That's how it worked out. When the girl passed the last exam, they went together again to pick up their daughter. The mother was so very upset. After all, when Camille went to study, she had to quit her job. And now they're leaving her alone. Don't be upset. You can always come and visit us, hugged her daughter. Okay. Her mother knew that she would definitely come to visit them many more times. Christopher moved Camille into his apartment. That's where they brought Jenna. They were a complete family now. All they had to do was get their passports stamped. Are you happy? Christopher asked her when they had been together for a month. Very much, she hugged him. Time flew by quickly. Camille graduated, got a job. Jenna went to kindergarten. After that, she went to school. Christopher and Camille were happy to have such a beautiful daughter. Yes, a daughter, because Jenna almost immediately started calling Christopher daddy. He didn't mind it, but he never gave up hope that they would have a child together. Today was the big day, Dad said. In the morning, he would put on his suit. It was me or us, and Jenna was getting the hang of it. Of course you do, but it's not so easy for us either. He sat down in front of his daughter, adjusted her jacket, helped her put on her briefcase. Come on, let's go. Camille joined them. In her hands was a huge bouquet, which consisted of asters and gladiolus. They were on their way to the lineup, which was the first time in the girl's life. Camille was a little worried, and Jenna, on the contrary, everything was interesting. School life is not easy, but it concerns not only children, but also their parents. How are you doing at work? Christopher asked his wife. It's fine. Why do you ask? She demanded pies in the kitchen. You look tired. Did he help make the filling? No, it's fine. Jenna's just a lot of work. And it was true. The kids had so much schoolwork that Mom couldn't keep up at all. Why didn't you say anything? I can help. He'd do anything to make the family happy. Then see what they're doing today. The girl was already in the 4th grade. She was bright, but she still didn't understand a lot of things. Only after deep consideration of the subject did she do the right thing. Well, in their family, it was mutual, each helping the other. Jenna, get up. You're late for the dance, shouted from the kitchen mother. Can I not go today? The girl was in 7th grade. She used to go everywhere without fail, but now she was beginning to exercise. No, that won't do. You're always ready to go out with your girlfriends. You have to try harder here too. Camille came into the room and looked at her daughter. Okay, she got up reluctantly and left like that. Mom giving her daughter time to change. And Jenna went to the dance class, which she was already tired of. She'd been going there since 1st grade. And now that everyone was older, she didn't want to waste any more time on it. Jenna, where are you going? Her friends met her. She rolled her eyes at the dance. Let's go for a walk. What do you need them for? They talked her into it. Come on, it's okay to skip it once. She looked around as if she was afraid her mother was watching her. They were meeting in one of the courtyards because there was a group of older guys there. They didn't pay any attention to the girls, but they still came to see them every day. Hey, Jenna and her friends walked past the young men. They didn't even turn around. They weren't interested in the kids. Why don't they even look in our direction? Asked Rick, who liked Rick. Because they have other interests, answered Jenna. The girls didn't waste the opportunity. They were in that yard every day. Come here, somehow John called out to Jenna. That she didn't expect to be called. The school year was almost at an end. Only a few days left until vacation. Go on, her friends whispered to her. The girl walked, her legs starting to shake. John was only a few meters away, but she felt like he was miles away from her. When finally Jenna was close by, the guy laughed. Did you call me over for a laugh? She didn't understand. She somehow braved it right away. No, it just shakes like a leaf. He took her hand. I can't help it. Jenna was telling the truth. All right, let's go. There's something to do. He called her over to the others. Hi, she came over. Listen, without greetings began to talk. Guys, we need you to come with us to the disco. Why? The girl realized they had some kind of plan. Our girls decided that we won't find anyone and sewed us up. So we'll show them that we don't care, they explained to her. She turned to her friends at that moment and waved for them to come to them. They were just waiting for that. They were there at the same moment. Jenna recounted everything to them. We agree. They imagined going to the disco with them. How will their classmates be jealous? Then we'll do it on Saturday. We are waiting for you here. John looked at Jenna and smiled. She must have fallen in love with him at that very moment. Jenna, I found out you were skipping the dance. Her mother came to her room. Did your teacher call you? The girl didn't understand. There was one class left until the end of the year, at least for him. Go, the woman asked. And from September, I will not go. She asked the woman. We'll see. Camille avoided answering. On Saturday, the girls had been at Jenna's house practically since lunchtime. They were coloring and picking out what to wear. Man, it doesn't seem too bright. Did Jenna turn to her friends? No, it's fine. They approved of what she'd done. But the girls still cleaned up a little of the makeup with wipes. Finally, they were ready. It was still over 2 o'clock before the event started, so everyone gathered in the same courtyard. Hi, the guys finally came over. They were now chatting like old friends. Let's go. Jenna took a look at John. He smiled at her. Jenna walked over to him, taking his hand in hers. This was very cool to her. John was in charge of the company, and now she's walking beside him. Why so much makeup? Asked the guy on the way. I knew it. She regretted not cleaning up as much as she wanted. Listen to her friends. Ahead showed the DK where the disco was held. Stephen began to shiver. What if your girls start fighting with us? Asked Jenna. For some reason, it only now came to her mind. They won't. And if they do, we're always here for them. He answered her. Good. She trusted that John would be able to handle everything. That night was just as the guys had planned. All the girls were older than Jenna and her friends by only 1 year. As soon as they saw that those came with their friends, they started to talk over each other. When Jenna went outside, they hurried to be there too. You know they're ours, said one of the girls. They were yours, now they're ours. She was not shy, Jenna. They bickered a little longer and then went back into the hall. A slow dance began. John approached Jenna. They danced, and she could see her rival's eyes sparkling. Let's get out of here. Her boyfriend called out to her. What about the girls? She looked at her friends. They can walk on their own. He looked the same way as the girl. Choosing well between the girls and the boyfriend, she favored him. They went outside. It was warm. Jenna took the guy under her arm again. They headed to where the market was during the day. Let's sit here. He beckoned her over to the tray and stood up himself, across the street. Okay. She liked the way he was treating her. You're cool, he touched her. You are too. She was smiling. She felt good right now. What if we start being friends? did he suggest it. Let's do it. She couldn't believe she was saying that. Come on now, I'll walk you out tomorrow. Come to the courtyard. He gave her a hand to help her climb down from where she was sitting. The next day, as promised, he was waiting for her where they always met. Jenna, are you two really dating? Looked at her surprised by her girlfriends. Yes, he proposed yesterday. She told them. But wow, what kind of guide did she get? Yeah, she looked down on them. But I gotta go. Jenna headed towards John. The girls kept up. They believed that if their girlfriend started hanging out with a guy like that, they might get lucky. Hi. She came up to him. Were you standing there with them for so long? He asked about the girlfriends. Talking about you, she told him honestly. The guy and the girl started a serious relationship. Now they rarely sat in that courtyard as a group. More often John came to pick up Jenna and they went for a walk. Who's that guy coming to see you? Asked her mother one day. His name is John. We have been friends for a couple months now. She blushed when she told her mother that. Why don't you bring a stranger to visit? The woman was afraid because the guy was 5 years older. I do not know, as that time has not come yet. Shrugged his shoulders. Why are you picking on her? Christopher intervened in their conversation. Well, I'm a mother. I need to know who my daughter is socializing with. Camille didn't understand him. Your daughter is 13 years old. Until she is so old that she can choose her suitors, we'll change them more than once, laughed Christopher. It's good for you to reason. You don't worry like I do. She sighed. Camille began to watch her daughter more carefully now. She was afraid that a grown boy might do something. But John was showing good behavior. The girl always came home on time. At school, she studied well. And so after a while, Camille let the situation go. There was a fall ball at school. And of course, there was a disco afterwards. Are you coming? Jenna John asked. And you invite to the school going did not feel like going. But if his girlfriend was going, he should be with her. When they got there in the evening, they saw that the girl with whom the guy used to be friends was also there. Jenna was dancing in a circle with her friends and suddenly felt someone pushing her back. She turned around and saw Vanessa, John's ex. What do you want? She asked her. You shouldn't look at other people's boyfriends and be friends with them. She answered her. You broke up. We started to be friends. What's wrong with that, Jenna? We didn't break up. I just wanted to teach him a lesson. And you see how it turned out. The girl spoke arrogantly. Well, who did you teach a lesson? You had Jenna laughing. The situation between them was getting so heated that everything was heading for a fight. Yeah, screw you, she said. Vanessa and shoved her in the shoulder. She grabbed her by the hair. And that's when the real scuffle started. The girls on Vanessa's side wanted to protect their friend, but the girls who were with Jenna didn't stand still either. John stood aside and only smiled at this. He was amused by it. The whole situation after the teachers who were on duty at the disco separated them. Jenna approached John. Is it funny to you? She asked him. Yeah, he answered. Fuck you. She turned around and walked toward the exit. Wait, he followed her. But Jenna didn't want to listen to him anymore. She was shaking with anger, not at the fact that she'd just gotten into a fight, but at having to fight over some guy. She'd never been so down at home before. She let the tears flow. Daughter, what's wrong? Mom came running into the room. Nothing. Please leave me alone, she asked. No, I want to know why my daughter is crying. Camille sat down on the edge of the bed. He turned out to be just like everyone else. The girl was crying. Calm down. There's nothing to suffer for. A woman stroked her head. Mom, you don't understand. That evening, nothing could help her. Her mother brought her some warm milk, which Jenna drank and went to bed. In the morning, Jenna went to school. After that, she went back home and never went out again. She really didn't feel like going out with John, but when she didn't come to the yard, the guy thought he should go to her himself. He knocked on the door, waiting a long time to be opened. Camille appeared on the doorstep. Hello, can I talk to Jenna? He asked her. No, answered the mother. Why didn't he understand? You hurt her badly yesterday, and she doesn't want to communicate with you today, said the woman. Since I hurt her, I just didn't want to get involved in the fight, that's all. He looked inside the apartment, but he didn't see Jenna there. Did she tell you that you two broke up? Camille looked at the guy carefully. Just call her, and that's all. The young man insisted. Okay, she went to the room where Jenna was. Told her everything. The girl went out onto the landing and closed the door behind her. Why are you doing this? Asked her John. You can all go to your Vanessa, we are not together anymore, she answered. He was sad to hear that, but there was nothing to do. So John just left. They broke up. Jenna suffered. But soon the study process, dance class, and everything else overshadowed her sadness. She still went out with the girls. John once tried to approach her at the disco, but she did not want to be with him. And then he disappeared from the city. Nobody saw him or knew where he was. Shall we go to the store? Christopher looked at his daughter. Yes, she nodded her head. Jenna was graduating from 11th grade, so she needed to buy a nice dress and shoes. Oh, I can't even believe school is behind us, Camille said to her daughter. I can't believe it myself, Jenna admitted honestly. Okay, enough about that. Let's pick out a dress. Showed Christopher the outfits of beautiful evening gowns, and Jenna did nothing but change dresses and spin around in front of the mirror. They all looked good on her, but she chose the one she thought was the prettiest. At graduation, they stood all together. Teachers and the principal congratulated them and said farewell words. After that, they moved to the hall, where the tables were already set. When the fun was in full swing, her friend pushed Jenna in the side. She looked up and saw John heading toward them. Can I talk to you? Did he approach the girls? No, she said, and turned away. She didn't feel like talking to him or seeing him at all. Why don't you want to talk to me? I don't understand why things didn't work out with you the other day. He wouldn't leave, he insisted. Okay, let's go. Jenna left the table and walked with John towards the exit. She didn't want to get into an argument in front of everyone. Outside, he clarified. Yes, she nodded, and they walked out of the school. Tell me, why aren't we together? He asked. What do you mean? It's been so many years, and you show up and ask me why we're not together. She was very surprised. All this time I remembered you. I wanted us to be together. He wanted to hug the girl. I was forgotten to ask. She didn't look at the guy. Give me a chance, he asked. Come back tomorrow. Maybe something will work out. She went back to where everyone else was. But John didn't wait until tomorrow. He saw all the seniors getting on the bus. He knew where they were going. There was a sunrise reunion ahead. Jenna approached him from behind. God, why scare her like that? She turned to him. I love you and I want to be with you. He put his arms around the girl. At that moment, she settled in. It was so beautiful. The dawn was just beginning. And here he is, confessing his love. Okay, let's try again. She smiled. John didn't say anything. He kissed her shoulder, then her neck. Mom, I'm home. She came the next day. Good, you took a walk. She saw that her daughter's makeup was a little smeared. What's your look? She was pointing at her face. I need to tell you something. Jenna walked to the room and started to change her clothes. Something serious tensed the woman. John and I are back together. Didn't turn around, she what? Why do you want him? Do you know what I heard about him? Camille couldn't believe it. They say you can't walk into the same river twice. You know, unless you step on your own toes, you'll never get anywhere. My daughter was in her pajamas. She was gonna get some sleep. Christopher, can you believe they're back together? The wife went into the other room and told the husband to stay out of it. Things can happen fast now, he warned her. You know what my friend told me about him. She sat down next to me. And what was it? He was ready to listen. He uses not only alcohol, but also many other things, whispered Camille. Oh, it's all your gossip. Christopher didn't believe it. Well, we'll see what happens. Camille wanted her daughter to be happy. She had to enroll, but because of the meetings with her boyfriend, she didn't want to leave this town. So let's go together. He suggested it to her. Are you serious? She was so excited. She was ready to go anywhere. They lived together. John did drink a lot, bringing strange people home with him. Jenna didn't like it, but she kept quiet because she loved John and didn't want to fight with him. Where are you going at night? She asked him as he was about to leave. It's none of your business. He'd leave, come back in the morning. And when Jenna pressed him for explanations, he'd lie to her. Sometimes the girl complained to her mother. She'd cry, told her to leave him. But Jenna couldn't. She loved the man so much that she stayed with him. If she kept on like this, it wouldn't be long before they broke up. Warned Jenna. John, come on. He was hugging the girl. You'll see. Jenna threatened him with her finger. John was afraid that the girl would leave him. After all, the apartment they lived in was rented by her father. So after they fought, the guy did everything he could to make up. So John decided to relax a little. Went to a bar that was close to the house. He went to the bar. There was another young man sitting there. Can I have a drink? John asked the bartender. Sure, he replied. What's bad too? Asked the one who was sitting there. I don't get it. John motioned to him. Robert. The stranger held out his hand. John answered the man. Nice to meet you. The young man was dressed normally. He sat and just drank. At that moment, John was poured a drink. He raised the shot, looked at the new acquaintance. Here's to us, Robert said. They started talking all the while and drinking. What's the matter with you? Asked John to the young man. Oh, it's a long story. The one wrinkled his nose and brushed it off. It's hard if you're sitting here alone pouring. I looked at the counter, where one glass after another was put out. Very exhaled that tell. I was ready to listen and support almost a friend. And what to tell? We lived normally. And then it began. He took the glass again. With his wife, John said. Aha. He looked away. And more people came into the bar. What changed? The guy was getting the words out of Robert. I was an ordinary guy then. I studied at the institute. I knew and could do a lot of things. Robert began his story. I see. Prepared to listen to John. Molly came to pick up some documents. She and I bumped into each other in the hallway, and her hand fell out of hers. I sat down, started helping her, picking it up. One of the forms said something about oil deposits. I was surprised, I asked. At that moment, Robert stopped talking. He decided to wet his throat again. Wow, were they oil tycoons? John was all ears now. You could say that. But I didn't know that at the time. I'd only seen the papers. Our institute specialized in this subject. So I was interested. I started telling what I knew. And Molly walked and smiled. As it turned out, she only works with documentation and doesn't understand anything about it. Robert shook his head. Wow, it's like a fairy tale. John looked at his new acquaintance fascinated. That's what I thought at the time. I met him and asked him out on a date. I don't know who liked me better, her father or herself. But from that moment on, I was part of their family. As if he remembered something, he curved his lips. Why the father? Didn't understand. He was sick of his work. Once he got a half-empty well, as many people thought. But he developed it, dug near it. Turned out there was oil. He's been in business ever since. I knew a lot about the subject. We talked to him for hours a day. And then he told his daughter I was the perfect man to marry. Heavy, Robert sighed. And you got married? John guessed. Yes, we started living together. I worked with my father. I thought Molly and I were made for each other and would always be together. We'd never be apart. And she did this to me. He took another sip. What did she do now? It was a very interesting story. While I was just a simple guy, she loved me. And then things changed. We started working. I started having money. We built a house, bought everything we needed. One day I came home and there she was with our driver, making out. It looked like Robert was about to cry. Wow. The new buddy shook his head. That's what I thought, too, and I asked her to come to her senses and come back. And she said I was just like her father. So 7 years of our marriage went down the drain. He took the glass and drank it all down. They exchanged phone numbers. Robert promised to keep in touch with him and to get him a job. Since Robert had had enough, he got ready to go home. John volunteered to walk him home, but it turned out he had a car waiting for him. That's it. I'll call you tomorrow, he said to his new friend when he got home, and told Jenna nothing. She looked at her husband, who was wobbling from side to side, and started talking to him and figuring things out. Just went to bed. And John sat there thinking of ways to get money out of the new buddy. I'm going to school. She told him to get dressed in the morning and left. Didn't even know if he heard or not. The couple's relationship was very strained. Jenna was even beginning to think that her mom was right when she told her about this guy not being right for her. Hi. That's when John dialed Robert's number. Hello, he remembered who was calling him. You promised to think about getting me a job, the young man reminded him. Yes, he only agreed because he always kept his promises. Come to my office. John was very happy. He'd walk, and on the way he'd think of something to catch on to. And then he'd think of something. Hi. He was greeted by a well-dressed man. Hello. For some reason, John got excited. I've got something for you. He opened the door for him. Okay, thanks. He tried to be polite. They sat there, had a long talk. And at the end, Robert said he was taking John into production as a technician. It was a happy thing. They said goodbye, and John went home. Jenna, I got a job, he told the girl. I congratulate you, she said cheerlessly. Why so sluggish? He stood up and walked over to her. Don't. She didn't want anything from him anymore. All right, don't be sorry. And he left the house again. Jenna breathed a sigh of relief. She didn't know what to do with this relationship. It was stressing her out. John went to work. He asked his supervisor to walk with him. It was for a reason. He wanted everyone to see who brought him here. This is where you'll be working, Robert showed me. All right, who's gonna explain everything to me? Just asked the new employee. You ask the guys. He pointed to the crew. Thank you. They shook hands and Robert went to his room. All right, guys, let me get this straight. John wanted to understand the principle of what was gonna be done. They started showing him one thing after another. Everything was easy and clear. Now he started coming here every day. But not much time had passed when the young man began to get more and more discouraged. So you do this and you do that, he commanded. Why would I do that? You're the one who should be doing it. The other workers resented it. You want me to tell you what you're really doing here? He called the boss that on purpose to show how close friends they were. The guys were afraid of losing their jobs, so they did what they were told. In the evening, John would go straight to the boss's office. How about a Scotch bar? He'd sit in the chair. You know, I'm a little busy tonight. He didn't know how to tell the guy to leave. I saw your workers taking something off the property today, John said, as if in passing. What exactly did the supervisor tense up about? He often saw that there were fewer new parts than there should have been. I don't know, but they were still talking about it afterward. I realized I'd hit a nerve, young man. I see. Can you show me who it is? Got up from the table, Robert. Sure, agreed the boy. Maybe the guys did take something off the property. Nobody knew that. But when John pointed them out and they were punished, now they were avoiding him. Remember when you asked me to go to the bar? You met Robert John after work. Yeah, he was waiting for the boss to call him. It's okay today. He pointed to the car. John slowed down on purpose. He wanted more workers to get out of the factory, and then ostentatiously got into his friend's car. But something even where we met. Robert looked at him. Come on. John didn't care where they went, as long as they got close to the money. He'd been getting a paycheck for a long time, and he hadn't done anything. As soon as he complained about someone or said something that would implicate the employees, Robert would punish or fire them. "Congratulations to you." The boss raised his glass. "On what?" "Excuse me, comrade." "With the fact that we work together," he smiled. "Come on." They clinked glasses and drank. After that, the friends sat, chatted about many things, and then decided to disperse. When the next day everyone came to the production, then many were summoned to the director. Some he fired, others reprimanded. "Why should we keep silent?" Asked in the corridor, one asked the other. "Exactly. We've already been fired. What's the use of hiding?" The man rushed back into the office. "We've already cleared this up." Robert looked at us. "No, we have a statement," they said firmly. "Speak up." The warden was ready to listen. "Do you know what your protege does all day?" asked one of them. "You mean John?" I couldn't understand, Robert. "He's the one they confirmed." "What does he do?" I wanted to hear what the workers had to say. "He walks around, commands, does nothing, makes us do nothing, and then tells you things that didn't happen." The man was shooting like a machine gun. "I don't believe you. John is a good man." The chief did not believe them. "But you follow him and see for yourself." The men advised him and left the office, not understanding anything. Robert looked out the window. In the evening, he called his friend again for a sit-down. Of course, he wouldn't tell him anything, but he wanted to see how and what he was doing. "Let's go to my place, and I'll introduce you to my girlfriend." John said, "Oh, not today. I didn't want you to look like that." "Robert, what are you talking about? Come on." The guy gave me his hand. "Okay." Robert couldn't say no to him again. They got in the car and drove to John's house, stopped, walked to the driveway. Sure to be comfortable. Robert was worried. He didn't want to disturb people. "It's fine," John assured him. They entered the apartment. Jenna was surprised. I wanted to kick her out at first, but when I saw Robert, I knew he wouldn't sit with her boyfriend until morning. "Hello," he said. "Hello." Repeated after John's boss. "Come on in." She pointed toward the kitchen. "Why not the room? Or did you not clean up again?" Started stepping on it. "That never happened." That's why Jenna's face stretched out. "Why would you do that?" The guest looked at him judgmentally. "She didn't deserve it any other way," John assured him. "Let's go." Robert was ashamed, although these words were not spoken by him. The host placed a table in front of the sofa. They sat down. Jenna started carrying snacks from the kitchen and whatever John asked for. "Thank you." Robert liked the girl. She didn't say anything, just walked back and forth. "Have a seat with us?" he asked her. "No, thank you." She looked at him. "Don't you get it?" shouted John. "Why are you doing this? Do you want to seem cool or the master of life?" Robert didn't understand. And that she refuses when respectable people ask. He shrugged as if he had nothing to do with it. "If you don't want to, you don't have to do it." After these words and left for the kitchen. And I now said John and went after her. What she turned to him as he entered the kitchen and closed the door. "It's okay what you've done here," hissed he. How could Jenna not realize what had happened to him? "And that's the man I need." "Got it. So you're going to come and sit with us like a sweetheart now." John grabbed her arm. "I'm not going anywhere." The girl wanted to get free, but she couldn't move. "I thought you'd sleep with him if I wanted you to." He squeezed her hand harder. Shrieked in pain, Jenna. "What's going on here?" Robert came into the kitchen. "Fuck off. What's the boss doing here?" "I'm sorry." He pulled himself together. He let go of Jenna's hand. Robert saw that there was a purple mark on her. "Let me see." He held out his hand. John stood and looked at them. Anger raged inside, but he didn't show it. "That's no way to behave," Robert said. "That's what I'm saying." John backed up his friend. "That's what I told you." The chief turned to him. "I see what you're looking at." Mocking. The guy attacked his girlfriend again. "That's enough packing. He won't leave you alone tonight." He was looking at Jenna. I already realized that. It's convenient. She didn't realize what was going on. Yes, he went to the hallway shoes, his father. Jenna did not bother to argue with anyone. She followed Robert's example. If you leave now, you may not come back, John shouted after them. If you don't stop working now, you don't have to go out, Robert told him quietly but firmly. I understand. The young man stopped. Robert and Jenna stepped outside. He pointed to the car. I can't. He'd kill me. And Jenna was in shock about everything that was happening. It's gonna be okay. They got in and drove off. He'd planned the whole thing. I couldn't figure it out, Jenna. I don't know. I don't think so, Robert said. Honestly. They drove to the house, and there the man walked her to the door, showed her where she could set up. You're so good to me. She thanked and went to her room. Jenna lay not sitting down. She waited for morning to come so she could go home, but she couldn't stand it either. She went outside. It was still dark. Where are you going? Robert asked her. He was sitting downstairs reading something. Oh, you scared her. I don't think it turned out well. She stood. Was she embarrassed at all? No, it was fine. He got up to see the girl off. If John had gone to bed after they left, he should be back to normal by now. Thank you, she said for the 100th time today. Get in touch, he smiled. The driver started her off in a matter of minutes. She entered the apartment and started packing. Where are you going? Asked Joan to the girl. How do you think? She put forward her hand, on which there were huge bruises. I'm sorry, he tilted his head. I can't. I've never seen you like this before. She continued doing what she was doing. Jenna, marry me. He stood in front of her on the floor. Are you out of your mind? In the evening, you're yelling and screaming. And now you're proposing. She couldn't keep up with her young man's changing moods. Please, I love you. I'm jealous. I'm crazy about it. He was still standing in front of her. Stand up. She held out her arms to him. They embraced. Then they went to their room and went to bed together. How are things at home? Asked Robert at work in the morning. It's fine. I apologized. She forgave me. We do that a lot. John didn't look him in the eye. I hadn't noticed, Robert said honestly. Okay, I went out of the shop. He was so angry. He wanted to take it out on somebody. He started yelling at the workers, and they were silent, as usual. But the guy didn't know that cameras had been installed all around the factory at night. That would keep anything unnecessary out. And also Robert could watch John at work. Robert wanted to see something that he could charge the young man for. He thought back to the ride he had taken with Jenna yesterday. He had liked that girl so much. How could she live with someone like John? Hi. John came home, and Jenna was waiting for him with dinner. Steamboat Jenna herself didn't know how it was that she hadn't seen in his mouth the real him that he now appeared to be. Nor could she understand how she could love him after all this. But it was true. Smells good. He sat down at the table. I tried. Everything seemed to work out for them. After that, the young man called the girl into the bedroom. There he settled on the bed, took the camera in his hands. What are you doing? She asked him. Dance for me, he asked. Are you crazy? And Jenna couldn't understand. What do you want? He looked at her begging. Oak, she turned on the music and started moving to the beat. Then John turned on the camera. Come on, he encouraged her. I won't be on camera. She stopped. What's there to remember? I'll look at how beautiful my wife was later. He begged. Okay, laughed Jenna. After that, Jenna danced while undressing. Strange as it may seem, but she got so carried away that she forgot about the camera. After the incendiary dancing, the girl climbed into bed, where there was a favorite man. There they had everything and continued. You are so hot, whispered John to her. I love you. She was melting at his words. Afterward, they would lie cuddled together for a short time and then fall asleep. It went on like this almost every night. John, come to my place, Robert called to the young man. All right now. He was in a hurry. How are you doing? talking to Robert in the office. Why do you ask? Is everything all right? John was surprised. It's been a long time since you and I went anywhere, the boss told him. Yeah, that's right. He nodded. Maybe to my place, Robert suggested. Let Yurka cook something for me then. John volunteered then. Very good. I'm sick of these bars, said Robert. That's what he wanted. He wanted to see Jenna. After work, they met and drove to where John lived. They didn't say a word on the way. They couldn't find anything to talk about. Finally, the car stopped. They got out and walked to the driveway. Jenna had been warned. She came home from school and immediately started cooking. The pie that John loved so much was concocted. They entered the apartment and sat down at the table. How good you are at cooking, complimented Jenna. Robert, thank you. She blushed. John noticed it. His fists clenched, but he didn't show it. How are you doing in school? Robert asked. It was going well, so it was just the two of them talking. Robert and Jenna. John, as an extra link, was just present. The evening went very well. As Robert got ready to go home, he kissed Jenna's hand. Liked what? Angrily, John said as the supervisor left their apartment. What's wrong with you? Was she afraid he might do something? Nothing. He grabbed her arm and threw her on the bed. Please stop, Jenna asked him. Now he went and turned on the camera, and then attacked his wife-to-be. Whatever he did to her that night, she just screamed and cried. Hello, Jenna. Robert called the next day. Good afternoon. She didn't understand what he wanted or why he was calling. How did it go yesterday when I left? He was really interested in that question. It was fine. She stood in front of the mirror and looked at her face, which had a huge bruise on it. I want to see you. The man insisted. I can't. She knew he was testing her, so it didn't go so well. He guessed. Robert, what did you want? She cried. Are you alone now? He asked first, and then looked at the monitor where he saw John on the cameras. What kind of question couldn't you understand, Jenna? I'll be right there. He hung up the phone. Jenna had no time to do anything, to think over the plan of action. But the doorbell rang. There was nothing to do but open it. Jesus, the man looked at her. What did he do to you? That's none of your business. She lowered her eyes. Yes, it is. He went into the apartment and started packing her things. What are you doing? What do you mean you're doing? She looked up with big eyes. We're going to my place. There's nothing for you to do here. He spoke confidently. What about John? She was worried. I'll deal with him myself, Robert promised. After that, they got into the car and drove to his house. After he explained to her where and what to look for, and then he drove to work. John, I need to talk to you. He called him over to his place. You've been getting a lot of calls, buddy. One of the employees said he was asleep. That's none of your business. The guy yelled at him. He quickly went to the office to go up to the boss. Hey, what do you want? He walked into the office. To fire you, said in a stern voice Robert. That smirk he heard. Couldn't stand his tone. Warden, what did I do? Didn't understand, John. What did you do? Robert turned the monitor to him. You can't prove anything. The guy got all nervous and twitchy. Jenna, I got her now. Leave her alone. Spoken calmly. Robert, you're gonna take my woman for yourself, aren't you? Shook his head. Thought he had it all figured out, didn't. All I did was save her from you. You saw her face. He got up from his seat. 1 million, said the young man. What don't you understand, Robert? 1 million, and she's yours. Not a muscle flinched on John's face. And if I report you for carrying from the factory? He pointed at the monitor. Ah, you almost threw yourself at it, John. You can't. Robert shook his head negatively. Are you going to agree to my terms, or is your life going to be hell? He was no longer embarrassed. Okay, 1 million, and you never even remember her name. Go to her. It's a deal. They shook hands. John walked happily out from the supervisor's office. He called his car and drove home. There he saw that the bride's belongings were indeed gone, rubbed his hands together and smiled. He decided to wait a couple days and then start putting his plan into action. This wasn't how he wanted to set things up, of course, but since things hadn't gone according to his plan, he found a loophole here too. A month passed. John knew that Jenna was still living with Robert, so he started following the man. Saw him arrive at work and dialed Jenna's number. "What do you want?" She answered after the second dial tone. "Hello, darling," he said in a unified voice. "Go ahead." She waited. At first, John wanted to tell her that her new suitor had just bought her, but then he decided against it. "I want money every month, 200 million, 300,000. He spoke in a tone that made it impossible to argue with him. "Are you crazy?" She even laughed. "No, but you are. When your video gets into the wrong hands, and you bet it will, I'll be well paid for it." He's laughing now. "John, you won't do that." Her voice was strained. "You know me. I'd do anything for money." She knew that. "Okay, I'll think of something," the girl promised. "That's my girl. I love you." The month went exactly the same date. "You owe me the full amount." He passed out. Jenna sat down on the bed and covered her head with her hands. What should she do? She would not be able to ask Robert for so much. She would tell him where she could get such money, and even monthly. The girl thought for the rest of the evening, until Robert came home. "Hi." He came into Anja's room. "Hello." She got up and walked over to him. "Jenna, let's go together. Let's have dinner," he asked her nicely. Now she had to do everything for them to be together. They went down to the first floor and sat down at a table. "Jenna, have you considered us as a couple?" Asked her a question head-on. "Robert, what about John?" She said that on purpose so he wouldn't think she was frivolous. "What about John?" "I think he's lost his mind. He started putting garnishes on her plate." "Okay, I'll think about your suggestion." And she started eating. It was so embarrassing that she was cheating on such a good man, but she had no other choice. "That's the answer I like," he smiled. From then on, Robert would leave money for Jenna before he left for work, so she could get to school and buy something for herself. And she'd take the crumbs and put the rest away. "Hey, you came home, Robert, and I made you this." And Jenna was downstairs waiting for him. "Where's Valentina?" He was looking around for his assistant. "I decided to let her go and cook for you myself." She was honest. "Thank you." He came over and hugged her for the first time. Jenna didn't resist. "Robert." She looked into his eyes that Robert was looking at her too. "I like you, but I need to get used to it." She was telling the truth. To be honest, she was already confused. Where in this house was the truth and where were the lies? When Robert left to take a shower, she saw that he had left his briefcase downstairs. She walked over, opened it, and there were papers and money. And Jenna clutched it. She didn't want to do this, and she didn't. But right now, her reputation depended on it. The girl took out a few bills, tucked them into her pocket. "What are you doing here?" She just had time to close her briefcase. "I'm looking at that beautiful stone you have." She lied because his bag was on top of it. "Do you want us to drown it?" he asked. Sure, it wasn't a lie. She really wanted to. Now Robert had gone somewhere. He came back, put some wood inside, lit a match, and in 1 minute the fire was blazing inside. It was beautiful. She sat down in front of him. "What did I say?" He lowered himself to the floor beside the girl. She couldn't take her eyes off the fire. She sat and looked at it. She saw different pictures of the world. "You're beautiful." Robert put his hand on her stomach. "Thank you." She was transfixed by what was happening. Robert got up, went to the bar, poured wine into glasses, and brought it to the girl. "I want you to have the same feelings for me that you have for John." He clinked his glass. About her took a sip, and she did too. After that, he started kissing her. Jenna at first was embarrassed. Robert saw this and stopped. "No, keep going." She turned around and hugged him. You are the most wonderful girl." He touched her lips. In the morning, when Robert wasn't home, she counted it out. All the money she had was missing a couple thousand. But Jenna thought that would be enough. She went to the place where they had agreed to meet John. "Here, give me the records." She handed him the money. "You're a fool. Now you'll give me this much every month." He laughed. "You what? Where will I get them for you?" She looked at him with big eyes to please her new lover more often. "He will." He turned around and walked away, and Jenna remained standing. She felt like she'd been doused in a slop that would never wash off. She went home and sat thinking again. Why so sad? Robert came up to her. "No, it's okay." She hugged and kissed him. Jenna now knew where the man's money was. She could take it freely, but she didn't want to. "What are we going to do?" Every night they found something to do. "Let's go for a walk." She just wanted to live, not think about something bad every day. "What do you say?" He took her hand, and they left the house. That evening went as well as any other. Robert and Jenna. The relationship progressed slowly. Every month she carried John's money, saved some, took some without asking. It was so disgusting when you deceive someone you've grown close to. 6 months went by. Robert and Jenna were living soulmates. "Will you marry me?" he asked. "No." She turned away and cried. "You what?" Didn't he realize what was going on? "I can't tell." She didn't look at him. When she met John once again, she told him everything. "He's asking me to marry him. I can't marry him while I'm cheating." She begged him to give him Plushenko. "You what?" "It's a gold mine. As a wife you can bring even more." He rejoiced. Jenna looked at the man she once loved. His eyes were crazy and his laugh was the same. "I can't," she screamed. "Then anyone with your ass on all the screens." He pointed to Jenna's pocket. "Well, please leave me alone," she cried. "Have you thought about me?" John walked in the opposite direction from her, and Jenna returned home. Her attitude was serious. She was waiting for someone she felt good about to come home. You might even say she loved him. But the girl was afraid to admit it to herself. "Hi, sweetheart." He hugged her. "Hello." She was hiding her eyes from him. "I couldn't figure out what was wrong with you, Robert." "I can't tell you that," Jenna said, "but you try." He crouched down and sat her next to him. "Okay," she took in more air. "I'm ready to hear everything, and I'll accept any truth from you," he told her. "I'm so ashamed." She couldn't keep her voice down, and Jenna fell silent. "My love, speak," he asked. "John." She started to what? "What John? Are you talking to him?" Was shocked. "Man, yeah." She lowered her head even lower. "I can't believe it. After everything he did to you." Robert even stood up. "When we lived with him, he often filmed me dancing, and then what happened in bed." She blurted it out so fast that some of the words just got lost. "And what wasn't getting through to the man? When you took me away, he called a few days later and started blackmailing me with it. Told me to give him money." "I'm sorry." She cried. "It's okay. Tell me what happened next." He sat closer to her and hugged her. "I didn't know where to get finances from you. I couldn't ask you. So I was saving from the ones you were leaving me." And she couldn't say the next sentence, and took without asking. He finished. "You thought I wouldn't notice. But if you need it, it's no shame." She raised swollen and crying eyes to him. "I'm sorry," she said again. "It's all right. Don't think about anything else at all. And don't cry." He put his arms around her and kissed her. Jenna couldn't believe it had gone like this. There was no fighting or arguing or anything like that. "Sweetheart, so you will be my wife?" He asked his big question again. "What about the shoot?" She couldn't understand. She didn't want anyone to see her. "It'll be fine. I said I'd do what I said. So I'll do what I said." He kissed her again. "If that's the case, then of course I'll do it." She pressed herself against his chest, realized that with this man she had nothing to worry about at all. The very next day, Robert had hired people to track John down, take away his camera and all the tapes and flash drives. Now he definitely didn't have any dirt, but he didn't stop there. Apparently, there was money. By now he was stalking Jenna. He went crazy with it, realized things weren't going his way. "Hey, you bitch," he hissed. When Jenna arrived at school, she would run back to the car, get in it, and sit there. That is until Robert arrived and walked her to the classroom. Robert, he's lost his mind. Jenna told her future husband, "We'll get over it somehow." He always knew something to comfort her. "I'm scared. What if he shows up at our wedding?" Jenna was afraid. "I expected anything from that man. Let him try." The wedding had to be postponed because John forged some documents and gave them out as from Robert Togo's firm, so they started checking, dragging him through the courts. Good thing the firm had a great lawyer who quickly cleared the whole thing up. Now John was being sought not only by Robert's trackers, but also by law enforcement. But that's it. I guess nothing can stop us now. Robert and Jenna's wedding date has been rescheduled. Good. She's calmed down a little bit too and stopped being scared. They invited a lot of friends, acquaintances, and family. "There's the man I always told you about." Camille pointed at her son-in-law. "Thank you, Mommy, for everything." Her daughter hugged her. "You're welcome, darling. The important thing is that you're doing well." They were happy. The wedding went off without a hitch. Robert couldn't be happy to have such a wife. "So, do you want to go on a trip or a flight?" he asked her. "No, I'm fine with you here." Jenna never left his side. Robert took a vacation. He decided to leave all business and devote himself to the woman he loved. The week flew by quickly, but it was like a fairy tale. Robert had so much lost love that he gave it all to Jenna. "Where were you before? Why didn't you take me away from him sooner?" She didn't live in his arms. "If I had, I would have." He held her so tightly in his arms and knew he would never let her go anywhere. A couple months later, Jenna met her husband at the door. "What's wrong with you?" He smiled. "I feel like someone is going to be a daddy soon." She looked at him. "I don't believe it." He lifted her into his arms. "Believe it." She put her arms around his neck. "Lord, not only have you given me the most beautiful woman, but she's going to give me an heir as well." He couldn't believe it. Things couldn't be that good. The pregnancy was difficult, and Jenna was not well. The paramedics had been called to her several times. What was it that she didn't realize? Her mom had told her that when she was pregnant, everything was fine, and she couldn't feel anything. "It happens." That's all the doctor said to her. Okay, Jenna was patient, and she wanted to make her husband happy so badly that she could endure and endure anything. She did, steadfastly for 9 months. And now they're taking her to the hospital. Soon their baby will be born. Breathe. That's all Jenna could hear through the worst of the pain. What am I doing? She couldn't even breathe with every movement. Every movement was painful. "Come on," screamed the midwife. Exhaled the girl. She thought she was going to die herself while delivering this baby. And suddenly, there was such relief. No pain, there was nothing else. There was dead silence in the room, and Jenna even rose up on her elbows. And at that moment, there was a shrill cry of a child. The girl put her on her mother's chest, whispered Jenna such a beautiful name. Standing next to the nurse like a little angel, explained the mother. "She really does look like one." The woman took the girl, wrapped her in diapers, and took her away, and lay down for a while longer. And then Robert came to see her. He was informed, and he immediately rushed to his favorite girls. "Congratulations, my love." He bent over his wife. "Thank you." She kissed him. "You're beautiful." He corrected her, kicked the jokes, and it's already okay. She realized he was doing it on purpose to make her forget. They were transferred to a room that Robert had paid for. Everything here was state-of-the-art. But Jenna didn't need any of that. She just wanted to get home. And so they were on their way to a place where they were loved and waited for, and smiled and held their baby girl in their arms. Robert, of course, had prepared everything according to the other way, he just couldn't. Jenna entered the nursery and gasped. Everything was so beautiful, especially for their baby girl. And you had tried so hard. She kissed him again and again. Drunk worked. It had been 2 months since the birth of the baby girl. Jenna was doing everything to make her daughter feel good. The grandparents came to visit, but Jenna said she would do everything on her own. So they just visited and left. Robert was so proud of his wife, he couldn't even put it into words. "I'm gonna take my daughter for a walk," she told her husband. Well, he was not worried because Jenna always walked through the local traffic and never strayed far from home. This day she went out, walked the same route she always did. Then she remembered that she needed to stop by a local store. The clerk had asked for the number of a manicurist. She looked around for someone to leave with the stroller. Then she thought nothing would happen in a minute. She left her daughter by the porch. She quickly went in, put her business card on the counter, and immediately came out and looked in the stroller. Her daughter, wrapped in a blanket, sleeping peacefully. "Let's go home," Jenna said, calmly, and walked down the paths again. She walked, humming something to herself, looking ahead where she could already see their house. She walked through the gate, walked up to the porch. The security guard offered to bring the stroller and the baby home. But Jenna refused. She would bring her daughter in herself. The girl threw the lid of the stroller, took out the baby in a blanket, and it seemed somehow light. Pulled back the corner, and there, instead of the baby, some rags. Screamed the mother so loudly that ran out of all the guards. Robert ran out too. "Jenna, what happened?" He bent over her. The daughter. She was sitting on the stroller. "Call everyone in immediately," the man said. "There was so much traffic, you couldn't miss a fly. Whoever did this couldn't have gotten far. He couldn't have gotten past the guards in a car. So it would have to be on foot and through the woods." The uniformed man who'd just arrived was making his conclusions. "That we're standing here. We need to run in there and calm the area," the woman shouted. She was ready to run wherever she needed to go. "Maybe we should leave the mother at home," the lawman asked. "No, Robert, I want to come with you." "Don't leave me alone," begged Jenna. "Okay, she will come with us," he agreed. Together, they walked towards the forest, which started at the edge where the last houses were. And the one who had done all this wasn't going to run far. As soon as the people entered the forest, he heard their voices and began to make noise himself so that he would be found sooner. "I think the sounds are coming from over there." One of the policemen pointed with his hand. "Let's go." He looked at the girl's mother and father. Quickly, Jenna hurried everyone. They got through some storm, found themselves on some yielding hillock, and Jenna almost fainted when she saw John standing there with her little girl in his arms. "What do you want?" Asked what he thought was an important question for this man. "Robert Place," he answered honestly. "John, you don't dare get hysterical." "Jenna, do you doubt it?" He lifted the child above his head. "There's no need to provoke him," one of the men in uniform asked. "Please, you want me to go with you, but don't do anything to the child." Jenna stood up. "I don't need anything from you." He laughed his ugly laugh, and he leaned back so far that it looked like he was going to fall. Then what? What all this was for no one understood. "You don't know how bad and painful it was for me. Now I want you to feel the same way. Try to feel what I felt." And again that lunatic laughter was the conclusion of most of those present. What is, Jenna saw one of the men pick up a pebble from the ground and go somewhere for a concession. She wondered what he was up to. "John, remember how you and I were friends, how we loved each other?" And she was quietly approaching him. "What do you think? Is that going to make me feel better?" He looked her in the eye. "I don't know. I thought you loved me for real. Why do you think I married Robert to take so much from him? We have enough to last us a lifetime." And she lied. But her voice didn't even waver once. "Drink," John heard from downstairs. He looked up, and at that moment Jenna snatched the blanket from him, and the others threw him to the ground. "Oh, you set me up as usual." He was beating hysterically. You wanted to rob me of the most precious thing I have in the world. She walked over to her husband, and Robert put his arms around her. Everyone, let's go home, he told Jenna. She lifted the corner. Her daughter was looking at her. It's okay, she whispered and kissed her. They returned home more or less calm. But Jenna could not forget the incident for a long time. Now she walked with the baby only outside the house. How did John's case end? She didn't go to any hearings. She didn't care as long as he was never in their lives again. He was committed to a psychiatric hospital, so I don't think he'll be out of there for a while. Or will he ever? I'm glad it's over. She was sitting next to the crib where their little girl was sniffling. Come here, he held out his arms to her. Jenna got up and walked over to her husband. Do you know how much your John valued you at? Finally decided to come clean, Robert. Did he sell me out? She couldn't believe me. For $1 million. He held her close. You priced me pretty cheap. She laughed. I was willing to give whatever he said, because I liked you even then. He kissed the woman who made him happy. I'm glad to hear that. I hope you don't sell me out. She laughed. Not for any money in the world. He hugged her tighter. There was a little girl crying in the crib. Mommy needed to feed her. Robert looked at his loved ones and only admired them. Are you embarrassing me? She looked at her husband. You should know how beautiful it is. He got up and left the room.